The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and destiny. For thousands of generations, the Jedi served as its guardians, interpreting its will and maintaining balance. But the Force is not omnipotent, nor is it the only power in existence. Beyond the edges of reality, in dimensions the Jedi never conceived, other energies flow through different universes: chakra, magic, cosmic forces that operate by their own immutable laws. And on rare occasions, when the fabric of space-time tears, when cataclysmic powers collide at singular moments, these separate realities bleed into one another. This is the story of such a collision. In a universe far removed from the Star Wars galaxy, a being named Nagato Uzumaki had transcended mortal limitation. Through unimaginable suffering, the loss of his parents, the death of his closest friend, the manipulation of his ideals, he had awakened the Rinnegan, eyes that granted the power of a god. He became Pain, the leader of the Akatsuki, an organization dedicated to bringing peace through a philosophy born from trauma. Only by making the world know true suffering could lasting peace be achieved. His plan reached its crescendo during an assault on Konohagakure, the Hidden Leaf Village, where he unleashed his ultimate technique, Chibaku Tensei, planetary devastation, a jutsu capable of creating artificial moons by manipulating gravity itself. But at the precise moment his technique reached critical mass, something impossible occurred. The dimensional barrier between his world and another grew catastrophically thin, a force nexus point, a place where the light and dark sides converged with unusual intensity, resonated with the massive gravitational manipulation of Pain's jutsu. Reality screamed, space folded, and Nagato's consciousness, along with his 6 paths of pain, was torn from his universe and hurled into the void between dimensions. When existence reassembled, it was under an alien sky. The planet Ryloth turned slowly beneath twin suns, its arid surface scarred by generations of exploitation. The Twi'lek population, already suffering under the weight of the Galactic Empire's occupation, went about their subjugated existence in the settlements scattered across the planet's habitable band. Imperial star destroyers hung in orbit like predatory birds, enforcing the Emperor's will. Stormtroopers patrolled the streets of Lesu, the capital, extracting resources and crushing any whisper of dissent. This was the galaxy 20 years after the fall of the Jedi Order, 5 years into the reign of Emperor Palpatine and his enforcer, Darth Vader. It was into this galaxy that Pain arrived. The dimensional rift opened 3 kilometers outside Lesu, in a rocky canyon where Twi'lek refugees had established a hidden camp. The tear in reality announced itself with a sound that defied description, like the universe itself was being torn apart and rewoven simultaneously. A blinding column of purple-white light erupted from the ground, spiraling upward into the atmosphere. The Force itself recoiled, sending shockwaves through every Force-sensitive being within a dozen parsecs. In orbit, Imperial officers scrambled to their stations. On Coruscant, thousands of light years away, the Emperor paused mid-conversation with his advisors, his yellow eyes narrowing. Something had entered his galaxy. The light dissipated, revealing 6 figures standing in perfect formation. They were humanoid but unlike anything the Twi'lek refugees had ever seen. Each wore a black cloak with red cloud patterns, garments that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their faces were exposed, revealing pale skin and features that spoke of human ancestry, yet marked by a wrongness that made the observer's instincts scream warnings. Each figure's eyes were identical, concentric purple rings radiating from the pupil, patterns that seemed to peer not just at the physical world, but into the very essence of reality itself. These were the 6 paths of Pain: the Deva path, the Usura path, the human path, the animal path, the Preta path, and the Naraka path. 6 corpses, reanimated and controlled remotely by Nagato's consciousness through chakra receivers, black rods that pierced their bodies at key points. To any observer, they appeared to be 6 separate individuals, Only Nagato knew the truth. They were extensions of his will, his philosophy given physical form. The Deva Path, the body that served as Pain's primary avatar, stepped forward. His orange hair moved in a wind that didn't exist, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. Where is this place? The shared vision of the Rinnegan processed the environment simultaneously through 6 pairs of eyes. The architecture was wrong, too angular, too metallic. The people were different species, humanoids with tentacle-like appendages growing from their heads. The energy in the air was familiar yet alien, similar to chakra but fundamentally different in its nature. Most disturbing, Nagato could feel no natural energy, no ambient chakra to draw upon. His reserves were finite here. But his power remained. A Twi'lek elder, a male named Gobi who had survived decades of Imperial occupation, approached cautiously. He had seen many things in his long life, but these beings radiated danger in a way that transcended species or language. Still, his people needed to know if these strangers were threats or potential allies against the Empire. You are not Imperial, Gobi said in basic, the common language of the galaxy. Are you Jedi, Force users? The animal path tilted its head, processing the unfamiliar terms. Through their shared consciousness, Nagato sifted through the sensory information. Force users, Jedi. These words held meaning here, implied power structures he didn't yet understand. I am Pain, the Deva Path responded, his voice echoing strangely across the canyon. I am a god who has descended to bring peace to this world. What is this place? What galaxy is this? The Twi'leks exchanged confused glances. Galaxy? Gods. Before Gobi could formulate a response, the situation escalated beyond conversation. Imperial sensors had detected the dimensional rift's energy signature. 3 ATSD walkers crested the canyon ridge, their weapons systems already tracking the 6 figures. Behind them, 2 squads of stormtroopers spread into combat formation. An officer's voice, amplified by his helmet's speakers, cut through the air with mechanical precision. Unknown entities, you are in violation of Imperial occupation protocols. Surrender immediately or be terminated. Pain's 6 bodies turned as one, the Rinnegan analyzing the mechanical constructs and armored soldiers with cold efficiency. These were warriors of some kind, similar to the samurai of his world but with more advanced technology. The energy weapons they carried registered as dangerous but not insurmountable. More interesting was the absence of any chakra signature. These were ordinary humans in armor, serving a military structure. An empire, another village that enforced its will through military might. The Deva Path raised one hand, palm forward. You point weapons at a god. You do not understand the magnitude of your error. Final warning, surrender or... The Imperial officer never finished his sentence. Shinra Tensei. The words were spoken quietly, almost conversationally, but their effect was cataclysmic. An invisible force erupted from the Deva Path's outstretched hand, a gravitational repulsion that could level entire villages. The ATSD walkers, each weighing several tons, were instantly hurled backward as if swatted by a giant's hand. They tumbled end over end, crashing into the canyon wall with enough force to crumple their armored hulls like paper. The stormtroopers fared worse. Those closest to Pain were pulverized instantly by the pressure wave, their armor offering no protection whatsoever. Those farther back were launched hundreds of meters, their broken bodies landing scattered across the rocky terrain. The attack lasted less than 2 seconds. When it ended, the Imperial force had been completely annihilated. The Twi'lek refugees stood frozen in shock. Gobi's Leku twitched involuntarily, a biological response to witnessing something that defied his understanding of reality. He had seen Force users before, the Jedi who once protected the Republic, and more recently, the Inquisitors who hunted Force-sensitive children. But this was different. The casual ease, the absolute devastation, the complete lack of any visible exertion. What are you?" Gobi whispered. Payne's 6 bodies turned their attention back to the Elder. "I'm what this galaxy needs. I'm the harbinger of true peace." The Deva Path gestured toward the destroyed Imperial forces. "This empire you serve, it maintains order through military occupation, through fear and suppression. I have seen such systems before. They create only resentment and suffering, planting seeds for future conflict." "We don't serve them," Gobi said, finding his voice. "The Empire conquered us. They enslaved our people, strip-mine our world. We are prisoners, not citizens." The Rinnegan studied the Elder, perceiving truth in his words. Payne's philosophy had always been built on a foundation of understanding suffering, his own and others. These people were victims of imperialism, just as his village had been victimized by the machinations of greater powers. "Then you understand pain," the Deva Path said. "That is good. Pain is the foundation of wisdom. Tell me about this galaxy. Tell me about the Empire, about these Force users, about the power structures that govern this reality." Over the next hour, as the Empire scrambled to respond to the loss of contact with their patrol, Gobi explained what he knew. He spoke of the Galactic Republic that had stood for 1,000 generations, of the Jedi Order that served as its guardians, of the clone wars that had ravaged the galaxy, and of the rise of Emperor Palpatine and his transformation of democracy into dictatorship. He described the Force, an energy field that connected all living things, granting certain individuals extraordinary powers. He explained the light and dark sides, the Jedi philosophy of peace and self-sacrifice, and the Sith pursuit of power through passion and domination. Payne listened with the patience of a god studying a new world. The parallels to his own universe were striking. The Force resembled chakra in function, if not in mechanics. The Jedi were like the shinobi villages, warrior monks who claimed to serve peace, but inevitably became tools of political powers. The Sith reminded him of those consumed by hatred and power, similar to the path he himself had walked. But there were crucial differences. This galaxy had no hidden villages, no system of balanced military powers. Instead, it had been unified under a single tyrannical government that maintained control through fear and overwhelming military force. The Emperor's philosophy, peace through domination, was a perversion of Payne's own ideology. Palpatine sought power for its own sake, to satisfy personal ambition. Payne sought power to end the cycle of hatred, to create a world where true peace reigned even if it required terrible methods to achieve. "This Emperor," Payne said, his 6 bodies surrounding Gobi in an unconsciously intimidating formation. "He does not understand true peace. He has created order through fear, but fear without understanding breeds only resentment. His empire will eventually crumble, and the cycle of conflict will continue." "Then, will you help us?" Gobi asked, hope flickering in his voice. "Will you help us fight the Empire?" The Deva Path was silent for a long moment, processing through Nagato's consciousness. Help them fight? No, that was not his purpose. Fighting created only more conflict, more pain without meaning. His mission had always been greater than simple rebellion. "I will not help you fight," Payne said finally. "I will do something far more significant. I will bring true peace to this galaxy. But first, your people must come to understand pain, the Empire's pain, the rebels' pain, the pain of all who suffer in this endless cycle. Only through shared suffering can humanity, can any sentient species, transcend their base nature and achieve lasting peace." Before Gobi could respond, alarms began blaring in the distance. The Imperial garrison in Lesu had detected the attack. More forces were coming, not simple patrol units this time, but a full military response. Payne's 6 bodies turned toward the city as one, the Rinnegan perceiving the approaching threat with perfect clarity. Armored vehicles, hundreds of soldiers, aerial support. They were coming to capture or kill him, just as the great nations had once sent their forces against his Akatsuki. They did not understand what they faced. "Stay here," the Deva Path commanded the refugees. "Watch, bear witness to what true power means, and remember, this is mercy compared to what I could unleash." The 6 paths of pain moved as one, gliding across the rocky terrain toward Lesu with supernatural speed. The Twi'leks watched them go, torn between hope and terror. 3 kilometers away, Imperial Commander Thrawn, not yet the Grand Admiral he would become, but already a brilliant tactical mind, studied the holographic display of the approaching threats. 6 humanoid figures moving in perfect synchronization, each displaying no heat signature, no biological signs his sensors could identify. The reports from the destroyed patrol had been fragmentary before communication ceased, but one detail remained clear. These beings had destroyed an Imperial force with contemptuous ease. "All units, establish defensive perimeter around the garrison," Thrawn ordered, his red eyes analyzing the tactical situation. "AT-AT walkers to forward positions. Air support, maintain high altitude and prepare bombardment coordinates. I want those beings captured alive if possible, terminated if necessary." But Thrawn, for all his genius, had never encountered anything like pain. The 6 paths reached the outskirts of Lesu as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city's Duracrete structures. The Imperial forces had established an impressive defensive line, AT-AT walkers standing like metallic titans, their heavy cannons aimed at the approaching figures. TIE fighters screamed overhead in attack formation. Hundreds of stormtroopers crouched behind portable shields, blaster rifles ready. The Deva Path walked forward alone while the other 5 paths hung back. When he reached optimal range, every Imperial weapon opened fire simultaneously. Blaster bolts, superheated plasma projectiles capable of punching through armor and flesh, converged on Payne's position in a storm of crimson light. The heavy cannons of the AT-AT walkers added their own devastating firepower, unleashing turbolaser blasts that could vaporize buildings. The TIE fighters dove, their laser cannons adding to the overwhelming assault. It should have been enough to atomize any target. Shinra Tensei. The gravitational repulsion expanded outward in a perfect sphere, invisible but absolutely unstoppable. Every blaster bolt was deflected back toward its origin. The turbolaser blasts were pushed aside, detonating harmlessly against the canyon walls. The TIE fighters that had dived too low were swatted from the sky like insects, their pilots killed instantly as the craft crumpled and exploded. The AT-AT walkers, massive as they were, began to slide backward, their feet losing purchase as the gravitational force overcame their weight. One toppled entirely, crashing onto its side with a thunderous impact. Stormtroopers were hurled through the air, their formation completely shattered. In 5 seconds, the Empire's defensive line had been broken. Thrawn watched from his command post, his expression unreadable. He had witnessed Force users in action before, had studied their abilities with his characteristic thoroughness. But this was beyond anything in his files. The scale, the precision, the apparent effortlessness. This being was either a Force user of unprecedented power or something else entirely. "Fall back to secondary positions," he ordered. "Deploy specialized containment measures, and send a Priority 1 transmission to Coruscant. The Emperor needs to know about this immediately." But Payne was not finished demonstrating his power. The Usura Path stepped forward, its body suddenly transforming. Mechanical components erupted from its arms, missile launchers, energy cannons, blades that gleamed with unnatural sharpness. This was the path of technology, of mechanized warfare, and it opened fire with devastating precision. Missiles streaked toward the retreating Imperial forces, detonating with massive explosions that carved craters in the city streets. Energy beams cut through armor and Duracrete with equal ease. The animal path performed hand seals, then slammed its palm against the ground. Summoning Jutsu. Massive clouds of smoke erupted across the battlefield. When they cleared, creatures from another universe stood ready for war. A multi-headed dog the size of an AT-AT walker, each head capable of regenerating if severed. A giant crustacean with impenetrable armor and devastating pincers. A bird large enough to carry multiple passengers, its wings creating windstorms with each flap. These summons, powered by Nagato's chakra and sustained by his will, were impossible by this galaxy's standards. Biological entities manifested from nothing, defying all known laws of physics. The Empire's forces broke. Trained soldiers, accustomed to enforcing order across a subjugated galaxy, found themselves facing nightmare creatures and opponents who shrugged off their most powerful weapons. The retreat became a rout. Thrawn maintained his composure even as his carefully planned defense collapsed. He had learned what he needed to know. These beings operated by rules foreign to this galaxy. Standard tactics would be insufficient. Overwhelming force would be required. Evacuate all non-essential personnel, he ordered. Prepare orbital bombardment coordinates. If we cannot contain these entities, we will ensure they cannot spread further. But before the order could be executed, the Deva path appeared directly in front of Thrawn's command post, having covered the distance with impossible speed. The commander found himself staring into those strange, ringed eyes, and for the first time in his career, Kiss felt something approaching fear. "You are the leader," Payne stated, not asked. "You command these forces." "Commander Thrawn of the Galactic Empire," he responded, maintaining his dignity even in defeat. "And you are?" "I am Payne, I am a god, and I bring a message to your Emperor." The Deva Path's voice carried across the battlefield, amplified by chakra so that every surviving Imperial soldier could hear. "Your empire is built on a foundation of fear and domination. You believe military might can create lasting peace. You are wrong. True peace requires shared understanding, and understanding comes only through pain." Payne raised both hands, and the 6 paths of pain moved into formation around the garrison. Thrawn recognized the stance, a preparation for some massive technique. "I will not destroy this city," Payne continued. "That would serve no purpose but demonstrating power, and I need no such demonstration. Instead, I will leave you with a message. Tell your Emperor that a god has entered his galaxy. Tell him that his false peace will crumble. Tell him that I, Payne, will show this galaxy what true peace means, even if I must make every being in it know suffering to achieve it." The Deva Path's hands came together in a seal unknown to this galaxy. Shinra tense, catastrophic scale. The gravitational repulsion that erupted was not aimed at people but at infrastructure. The Imperial garrison, every building, every vehicle, every weapon emplacement, was simultaneously crushed downward and outward, as if a giant hand had simply flattened the entire complex. Duracrete shattered. Metal screamed and tore. In 30 seconds, the Empire's primary installation on Ryloth had been reduced to rubble and twisted wreckage. But not a single person died in the destruction. Payne had ensured the repulsion avoided the living, targeting only structures and machines. This was a message, not a massacre. As the dust settled, Thrawn stood amid the ruins of his command, untouched but utterly defeated. The 6 paths of pain stood at the periphery, watching with those terrible eyes. "Remember this mercy," the Deva Path said. "Next time, your Emperor's forces will not be spared. This galaxy will learn pain and through pain achieve peace." Then, as suddenly as they had arrived, the 6 paths of pain turned and vanished into the canyon shadows, leaving behind a shaken Imperial force and a galaxy that had just learned something new existed within its borders. On Coruscant, in his throne room deep within the Imperial Palace, Emperor Palpatine received Thrawn's report. The holographic display showed footage of the battle, the impossible techniques, the strange eyes, the casual devastation. For the first time in years, Palpatine smiled with genuine interest. "A god, you say?" he chuckled, the sound like rocks grinding together. "How fascinating. Vader, come. We have a new player in our galaxy, and I wish to understand what manner of being claims divinity in my empire." In another part of the galaxy, a rebel intelligence cell intercepted the Imperial transmissions. The footage and reports were immediately forwarded to the Alliance leadership. In hidden bases across dozens systems, rebel commanders watched the recordings with a mixture of hope and concern. Mon Mothma, leader of the Rebel Alliance, studied the images of pain with thoughtful eyes. He destroyed an Imperial garrison but spared their soldiers. His power is clearly extraordinary, but his motives are unclear. We need more information before deciding if he's a potential ally or another threat. Saw Gerrera, the extremist rebel leader, had a different reaction. "This pain speaks of peace through suffering. That sounds like Jedi philosophy twisted through a dark lens. We should find him before the Empire does, if he can be turned to our cause." But Mon Mothma shook her head. "Or he could be more dangerous than the Empire itself. We proceed cautiously." On Ryloth, as night fell over the devastated garrison, Gobi and his fellow Twi'leks emerged from their hiding place. The refugees looked upon the ruins of Imperial power with wonder and terror in equal measure. Pain had spoken of bringing peace through suffering, of making the galaxy understand pain. The refugees didn't understand his philosophy, but they understood one thing clearly. The Empire had a new enemy, one who wielded power that made even their star destroyers seem insufficient. In the days to come, the recording of Pain's attack would spread across the galaxy through underground networks and stolen Imperial channels. Beings on 1,000 worlds would watch the footage and ask the same questions. What was this being? Where had he come from? And most importantly, whose side was he on? Pain himself had retreated to a remote cave system, where Nagato's true body rested, conserving chakra. Through the shared vision of the Rinnegan, he contemplated this new galaxy he found himself in. It was larger than his world, more technologically advanced, but plagued by the same fundamental problems. Conflict born from misunderstanding, suffering without meaning, false peace maintained through violence. He had been torn from his original mission, from his confrontation with Naruto Uzumaki and the Hidden Leaf Village. But perhaps fate, or whatever force governed dimensional rifts, had brought him here for a reason. This galaxy needed what he could provide, a demonstration of true power, of what peace through pain really meant. "This galaxy suffers," he whispered to the darkness. "The Empire oppresses. The rebels fight without understanding the futility of their struggle. Force users wield power without wisdom. They are all trapped in the same cycle that plagued my world." His ringed eyes glowed faintly in the cave's darkness. "I will teach them. I will make them understand. And if I must become this galaxy's villain to achieve true peace, then so be it. That is the burden of a god." Outside, the twin suns of Ryloth set completely, plunging the world into darkness. But across the galaxy, in 1,000 intelligence centers and military installations, beings stayed awake, studying the footage, analyzing the threat. A new era had begun. Pain had entered the Star Wars galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The message reached Darth Vader while he meditated in his personal chamber aboard the Executor, his super star destroyer. The meditation sphere hung suspended in the center of the room, a perfect sphere of polished durasteel that opened like a mechanical flower to reveal the Dark Lord seated within. This was one of the few places where Vader could remove his helmet without risk, where he could breathe without the constant mechanical assistance that kept his ruined body functional. The interruption came through his personal comm channel, encrypted and flagged as Priority Alpha, the highest classification in the Imperial hierarchy. Only one being in the galaxy could issue such a summons. "Lord Vader," the Emperor's voice crackled through the speaker, distorted by the encryption but unmistakably commanding. Return to Coruscant immediately. We have a situation that requires your particular expertise. Vader's meditation sphere closed, the mechanisms hissing as his helmet locked back into place. His breathing resumed its familiar rhythm, the mechanical rasp that had become synonymous with death across the galaxy. He did not question the order. He never questioned his master's commands, not since that terrible day on Mustafar when he had lost everything and been reborn as something less than human. 20 hours later, Vader stood in the Emperor's throne room, the vast chamber atop the Imperial palace that overlooked all of Coruscant. Palpatine sat upon his throne, his hooded face barely visible in the dim red light that seemed to emanate from nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. "Master," Vader intoned, kneeling. "Rise, Lord Vader, come. There is something you must see." The Emperor gestured, and a holographic display materialized before them. Vader watched in silence as the footage from Ryloth played, the dimensional rift opening, the 6 paths of pain emerging, the casual devastation of Imperial forces, and most significantly, the strange eyes that seemed to pierce through the recording itself. "Commander Thrawn's report is most illuminating," Palpatine continued, his voice carrying that particular tone of dark amusement he adopted when genuinely interested in something. "This being calls himself Pain. He claims to be a god. He speaks of bringing peace through suffering, and most intriguingly, he demonstrates abilities that do not conform to our understanding of the Force." Vader studied the footage with the analytical precision that had made him the Empire's most effective enforcer. The gravitational manipulation resembled Force push, but the scale was far greater than even the most powerful Jedi Masters had achieved. The multiple bodies moving in perfect synchronization suggested either cloning technology or something more esoteric. The summoned creatures defied all known biological principles. "He is powerful," Vader acknowledged, "but he bleeds. All beings bleed." Indeed, the Emperor's yellow eyes gleamed beneath his hood. But is he a threat or an opportunity? His philosophy, peace through controlled suffering, bears certain similarities to Sith doctrine, yet he claims to serve no master, to answer to no authority but his own divinity. Such arrogance is intriguing. Vader understood the unspoken command. The Emperor wanted this being evaluated, measured, and either recruited or eliminated. It was the same process applied to every potential Force user discovered since Order 66. The Inquisitors had been built on this principle. Convert them to serve the Empire or ensure they could never threaten it. "I will bring him before you, Master, dead or alive." "No," Palpatine raised a withered hand. "Not yet. First, I wish to test him. The Inquisitors has grown complacent, hunting scattered Jedi remnants and Force-sensitive children. Let us see how they fare against a being who claims godhood. If they succeed, we will know his power has limits. If they fail," the Emperor's smile was a terrible thing, "then you will intervene, my apprentice, and we shall learn just how divine this pain truly is." The Inquisitors had been established in the early years of the Empire, composed of fallen Jedi and Force sensitives corrupted to serve the dark side. They wore black armor, wielded spinning double-bladed lightsabers, and answered directly to Darth Vader. They were hunters, trained specifically to track down and eliminate the surviving Jedi who had escaped Order 66. 3 of them were dispatched to Ryloth, the 3rd sister, the 7th sister, and the 5th brother. Each had their own specialization: interrogation, tracking, and brute force respectively. Together, they had successfully hunted down and killed 17 Jedi Knights and 3 Jedi Masters over the past 5 years. They arrived on Ryloth with absolute confidence in their superiority. The 3rd sister, a dark-skinned human woman whose anger burned like a furnace, led the team. She had been a youngling in the Jedi Temple when Order 66 began, had watched her mentors cut down by clone troopers, and had survived by embracing the hatred that the Jedi teachings had forbidden. Now, she served the Empire with fanatical zeal, believing that power through passion was the only truth that mattered. The target was last seen moving east from Lesu, she informed her companions as their transport descended toward the canyon systems. Local informants report he has established a position in the cave networks. Intelligence suggests he is alone, which means this will be a simple extraction. The seventh sister, a Mirialan female with geometrically tattooed skin, checked her double-bladed lightsaber with practiced efficiency. Commander Thrawn's report indicated multiple targets, 6 separate entities. How do we know they haven't dispersed? Because gods don't hide, the fifth brother rumbled, his massive frame barely fitting in the transport seating. If this being truly believes himself divine, he will face us directly. His arrogance will be his weakness. They were wrong on every count. The Inquisitors landed their transport 2 kilometers from the cave system Payne had claimed as his temporary sanctuary. They approached on foot, using the Force to mask their presence, a technique that had allowed them to ambush many unsuspecting Jedi. The rocky terrain of Ryloth provided adequate cover, and their dark armor blended well with the shadows cast by the planet's twin suns. They never reached the caves. At exactly 1 kilometer from their target, all 3 Inquisitors stopped simultaneously. The Force, that omnipresent energy field they had trained their entire lives to perceive and manipulate, suddenly screamed a warning. It was a sensation unlike anything they had experienced before, as if reality itself had taken notice of them and found them wanting. "Something's wrong," the seventh sister whispered, her hand moving to her lightsaber. "The Force is disturbed, not dark side, not light side. Something else." Before any of them could react, the attack came from 6 directions at once. The animal path descended from above, riding on its giant bird summit. The Usra path emerged from behind a rock formation, its mechanical arms already transforming into weapons. The Preda path and human path appeared from opposite flanks. The Naraka path materialized directly ahead, and the Deva path, Payne's primary body, simply walked into view as if he had been waiting for them all along. 6 bodies, 6 pairs of Rinnegan eyes, all focused on the 3 Inquisitors with the detached interest of a scientist observing specimens. "You are the hunters the Empire sent," the Deva path stated, his voice echoing strangely across the canyon. "I sensed your approach. This Force you wield, it resonates with chakra but operates by different principles. Fascinating." The third sister ignited her lightsaber, the red blade humming with contained plasma. "Surrender immediately. The Emperor wishes to speak with you. Comply and your death will be quick." Payne's 6 bodies tilted their heads in perfect synchronization, an unsettling gesture that made the Inquisitors instinctively step back. "Death? You threaten a god with death. Your arrogance exceeds even that of the great nations that once opposed me. Very well. I will demonstrate why such threats are meaningless." The third sister attacked first, launching herself forward with Force-enhanced speed. Her lightsaber spun in a deadly arc, the Makashi form executed with lethal precision. She had killed Jedi Masters with this attack, beings far more experienced and powerful than her. The Preda path simply raised one hand. The lightsaber's blade made contact with the path's palm and stopped. The superheated plasma that could cut through durasteel, that could slice through flesh and bone with contemptuous ease, was halted as if it had struck an impenetrable barrier. The third sister's eyes widened in shock. "Your weapon relies on energy," the Preda path said calmly. "Energy I can absorb." The lightsaber's blade began to shrink, its power literally drained away by the Preda path's absorption technique. The third sister tried to pull back, but the human path had already moved behind her with inhuman speed. A hand grasped her shoulder, and she felt something terrible, a pulling sensation, as if her very essence was being torn from her body. "No," she desperately pushed with the Force, a blast of dark side energy that should have thrown her attacker backward. The Preda path absorbed that too, drinking in the Force energy like a man dying of thirst. This dark side you channel, it tastes of hatred and pain, familiar, but ultimately just another form of chakra to be consumed. The seventh sister and fifth brother attack together, their years of training allowing them to coordinate perfectly. The seventh sister used force push to create an opening, while the fifth brother charged with his lightsaber held in the gem so power attack stance. It was a combination that had overwhelmed many opponents. The Asura Path's body exploded into mechanical nightmare. Missile launchers erupted from its shoulders, firing micro-rockets that forced the seventh sister to dodge. Energy cannons emerged from its forearms, beams of concentrated destruction that carved through the rock where the fifth brother had stood a moment before. Blades extended from every joint, transforming the path into a walking weapons platform. Your technology is crude but effective, the Asura Path observed even as it fought. These energy weapons, lightsabers you call them, are elegant, but elegance means nothing against overwhelming firepower. The fifth brother roared and brought his lightsaber down in a devastating overhead strike. The Asura Path caught the blade between two of its mechanical appendages, the plasma cutting into the metal but failing to sever it completely. While the Inquisitor struggled to free his weapon, the Asura Path's chest opened to reveal a massive energy cannon charging with ominous light. Die, false god! The fifth brother abandoned his lightsaber and thrust both hands forward, unleashing a torrent of force lightning, the signature technique of the Sith, electricity generated through pure dark side power. The Preta Path stepped between them and absorbed the lightning completely, the purple electricity flowing into its body and dissipating harmlessly. Energy is energy, it said simply. The source matters less than you believe. The third sister had managed to break free from the human path's grip, though she felt violated in a way that went beyond physical. That technique, whatever it was, had tried to extract something fundamental from her being. Her soul, her essence. She didn't have time to contemplate the implications. Together, she commanded, overwhelm them with coordinated attacks. The three Inquisitors formed a triangle formation, their lightsabers creating a web of deadly plasma as they attacked the six paths from multiple angles simultaneously. They used every technique in their arsenal: force push, force pull, telekinetic throws, precognitive dodges, lightsaber forms perfected over years of training and combat. It wasn't enough. The six paths moved with perfect coordination, their shared vision allowing them to perceive every attack before it landed. The Deva Path would use Shinra Tensei to deflect lightsaber strikes. The Asura Path would counter with mechanical weaponry. The Preta Path would absorb any force-based attacks. The human path would attempt soul extraction whenever an opening appeared. The animal path would summon creatures to attack from unexpected angles. And the Naraka Path observed, ready to resurrect any path that fell. The battle lasted 7 minutes, an eternity in combat between Force users. The Inquisitors gave everything they had, fought with skill and power that would have overwhelmed most opponents. But pain was not most opponents. The turning point came when the fifth brother attempted a desperate gambit. He threw his lightsaber in a wide arc, using the force to guide it toward the Deva Path's back while he charged forward with a borrowed vibroblade. It was a technique that required split-second timing and absolute focus. The Deva Path caught the spinning lightsaber with Bancho Tenon, universal pull. The gravitational attraction reversed the blade's trajectory, sending it flying back toward its wielder. The fifth brother was forced to dodge his own weapon, breaking his charge. In that moment of imbalance, the human path struck. Its hand pierced through the fifth brother's armor as if it were paper, grasping something immaterial and vital. The massive Inquisitor's eyes went wide, his mouth opening in a silent scream. His soul, that spark of consciousness and identity that the Force recognized as unique, was being torn from his body. No, the third sister unleashed a blast of pure rage through the Force, a technique born from hatred and desperation. The Preta Path absorbed most of it, but enough raw emotion got through to disrupt the human path's concentration. The fifth brother collapsed, alive but unconscious, his soul still intact but his mind shattered by the trauma of near extraction. "Enough," the Deva Path said, and there was finality in his voice. "You have demonstrated your capabilities. You fight well, better than most shinobi I have faced, but you lack true understanding of pain." The Deva Path raised one hand. An invisible force seized all three Inquisitors simultaneously. They were lifted into the air, held immobile by gravitational manipulation that their force powers could not overcome. The third sister struggled, channeling every ounce of dark side power she possessed, but it was like trying to fight against the gravity of a planet itself. "You serve an empire built on fear and domination," Pain continued, his 6 bodies surrounding the captured Inquisitors. "You hunt and kill those who oppose your master's will. You believe this makes you powerful, that your service has meaning, but you are merely tools, extensions of another's ambition." "We serve the Emperor," the third sister gasped, still fighting against the invisible bonds. "The greatest Force user in the galaxy." "Your Emperor is a tyrant who has manipulated you into betraying your original purpose," the Deva Path replied. "I have known many like him, those who seek power for its own sake, who create systems of control dressed as order. They are obstacles to true peace." The seventh sister, ever the analyst even in defeat, studied Pain's eyes with desperate fascination. "Those eyes, they're not natural. What are you? You're not a Force user. You're something else entirely." "I am Pain, I am a god, and I am this galaxy's only hope for lasting peace." The Deva Path's expression remained impassive, but there was something almost sorrowful in his words. "You three have suffered. I can see it in your techniques, in the way you wield the dark side. Trauma has shaped you, molded you into weapons. This is pain without understanding, suffering without purpose." The human path approached the third sister, reaching toward her face. She tried to turn away, but the gravitational hold kept her immobile. The path's hand touched her forehead gently, almost tenderly. "Let me show you true pain." What happened next would haunt the third sister for the rest of her life. The human path's technique didn't extract her soul. Instead, it allowed Pain to share his memories directly with her consciousness. She experienced in compressed form Nagato's life, the death of his parents during war, the loss of his friend Yahiko, the manipulation by Abido, the philosophy born from endless suffering. She felt the weight of his conviction, the certainty that only through shared pain could humanity evolve beyond conflict. And she understood, for one terrible moment, exactly what Pain meant when he spoke of true peace. When the human path withdrew, the third sister was weeping, tears streaming down her face. I see. Oh gods, I see." "Now you understand," the Deva Path said quietly. "The Emperor you serve, the Jedi you hunt, the rebels who fight against oppression, they are all trapped in the same cycle. Light versus dark, order versus chaos, endless conflict with no resolution. I will break this cycle. I will make this galaxy know pain, and through that shared suffering create true peace." He released them then, the gravitational hold dissipating. All 3 Inquisitors collapsed to the ground, their strength exhausted. The 5th brother remained unconscious. The 7th sister could barely move, her body battered from the fight. And the 3rd sister lay curled on the ground, her mind reeling from the existential revelation she had been forced to experience. "Return to your Emperor," Pain commanded. "Tell him what you witnessed here. Tell him that his empire is temporary, that his power is an illusion, that true peace will come whether he accepts it or not. Tell him that I, Pain, offer him one chance. Submit to the greater purpose, help create a galaxy united in understanding, or be swept away as an obstacle to peace." The animal path's giant bird descended, and Pain's 6 bodies climbed onto its back. As they rose into the air, the Deva Path looked down at the defeated Inquisitors one last time. "Your suffering has not been meaningless. It has brought you to this moment where you can choose to continue serving false peace or seek true understanding. The choice is yours. Then the 6 paths of pain were gone, vanishing into the Ryloth sky, leaving behind 3 broken Inquisitors and a message that would shake the Empire to its foundations. The report reached Darth Vader 3 hours later, transmitted through encrypted channels with maximum security protocols. He stood alone in his meditation chamber, watching the holographic recording captured by the 7th Sister's combat recorder. The footage was fragmentary, damaged by the intensity of the battle, but it showed enough. 3 Inquisitors, trained killers who had successfully hunted down dozens of Jedi, defeated with contemptuous ease. Techniques that defied his understanding of the Force. Eyes that seemed to perceive reality on a fundamental level. And most disturbing, the 3rd Sister's testimony about what she had experienced when the human path touched her mind. "He showed me his pain, Lord Vader," her recorded voice said, still shaken hours after the encounter. "Not just memories, but understanding. I felt what drove him, what motivates his philosophy. He truly believes he is saving the galaxy from itself. And the worst part is, part of me believes him." Vader replayed that section 3 times, analyzing every word, every vocal inflection. The 3rd Sister had been one of their most fanatically loyal Inquisitors, a survivor of Order 66 who had embraced the dark side completely. For her to express even partial sympathy with an enemy's ideology was unprecedented. This pain was more dangerous than the Emperor realized, not because of his power, though that was considerable, but because he offered a philosophy that could subvert Imperial loyalty. Vader had seen many Force users, fought countless Jedi and dark side adepts, but he had never encountered anyone who could shake an Inquisitor's faith with nothing but shared pain. The mechanical rasp of his breathing filled the meditation chamber as Vader considered his options. The Emperor wanted this being evaluated and potentially recruited, but Vader's instincts, honed by decades of combat and betrayal, told him that pain could not be controlled. He was not like the Inquisitors, broken and rebuilt into Imperial servants. He was something fundamentally different, operating by principles foreign to both Jedi and Sith, which meant he was a threat that needed to be eliminated. Vader activated his secure comm channel, connecting directly to the Emperor's throne room. "Master, I have reviewed the Inquisitor's report. This being's power is significant, but more concerning is his ideology. He corrupts through philosophy rather than force. Permission to engage personally." There was a long pause before Palpatine responded. When he did, his voice carried notes of dark amusement. "You believe 3 Inquisitors were insufficient, Lord Vader. The Inquisitors were a test. Now we know what we face. Allow me to conduct a proper assessment." "Very well, but Vader," the Emperor's tone shifted, becoming sharp as a vibroblade. "Do not underestimate this opponent. He defeated our hunters without killing them, which suggests either mercy or arrogance. Discover which. If he can be turned, I want him brought before me. If not, ensure he poses no further threat to our order." "Yes, my master." Vader ended the transmission and stood in silence for a long moment. Through the Force, he could sense the disturbance this pain had created, a wrongness in the cosmic order, like a stone thrown into still water. Whatever this being was, wherever he had come from, he did not belong in this galaxy. And Darth Vader, the Emperor's iron fist, would be the one to remove him. The Dark Lord activated his ship's navigation systems, plotting a course to Ryloth. Behind him, his meditation chamber sealed shut, the mechanical sphere that protected his vulnerability closing like a coffin. His breathing echoed in the enclosed space, that familiar rhythm that had accompanied so much death across the galaxy. Soon it would accompany one more. On Ryloth, in the cave system he had claimed as sanctuary, Nagato's true body rested in meditation. His emaciated form, ravaged by years of channeling the Rinnegan's power, lay motionless while his consciousness directed the 6 paths across the planet's surface. The battle with the Inquisitors had been educational. He now understood how Force users fought, how their powers functioned, and most importantly, their limitations. They were strong, far stronger than average shinobi, but they lacked the versatility of his six paths, the absolute superiority of the Rinnegan, the philosophical conviction that made him willing to bear any burden to achieve peace. Through the shared vision of his paths, Nagato perceived the approaching threat before it entered orbit. A massive warship, larger than any vessel the Inquisitors had arrived in. And aboard it, a presence in the Force, or chakra, or whatever this galaxy called it, that dwarfed the Inquisitors like a sun outshone candles. So, the Deva Path whispered to the empty canyon, they send their champion. Good. Let them witness true divine power. Let them understand that mortal strength, no matter how great, cannot overcome a god. The six paths of pain moved into position, spreading across the terrain in a formation that would allow them to engage from multiple angles. They did not hide, did not attempt stealth. Gods did not need to hide from mortals. Above Ryloth, Darth Vader's Star Destroyer emerged from hyperspace, its massive bulk casting a shadow across the planet's surface. In his personal meditation chamber, the Dark Lord stood, his black armor reflecting the red emergency lighting. "Prepare my shuttle," he commanded. "I will face this god alone, and if he is truly divine," Vader's respirator hissed with dark promise, "then I will teach him that even gods can die." The pieces were in motion. The Empire's greatest warrior descending to face the self-proclaimed god. Two beings, each convinced of their own superiority, each willing to destroy the other to achieve their vision of peace. Only one would walk away from the confrontation to come. And the galaxy would never be the same. The Lambda-class shuttle descended through Ryloth's atmosphere with perfect precision, its wings folding upward into landing configuration as it approached the coordinates where the Inquisitors had encountered pain. Darth Vader stood alone in the passenger compartment, his presence so oppressive that even the veteran Imperial pilots felt their hands trembling on the controls. They had flown the Dark Lord to countless battlefields, delivered him to dozens of executions and purges, but this mission felt different somehow. There was an anticipation in the air, a sense that whatever happened in the next hours would reshape the Empire itself. The shuttle touched down on the rocky plateau overlooking the canyon system, its landing struts hissing as they took the weight. The boarding ramp lowered, and Vader emerged into the twin-sun glare of Ryloth's afternoon. His black armor absorbed the light, making him appear as a void in the landscape, a silhouette of death against the barren rocks. He did not need to search for his target. Through the Force, Vader could perceive Pain's presence like a burning star, impossible to miss and equally impossible to ignore. But it was wrong somehow, this presence. It registered as life, as consciousness, but it lacked the organic flow of Force energy that characterized all living beings. It was as if he were perceiving six separate entities that were simultaneously one, a contradiction that should have been impossible. "Interesting," Vader murmured, his vocabulator turning the word into something mechanical and emotionless. "You are either a master of illusion or something beyond my experience." He began walking toward the canyon, his cape flowing behind him in the arid wind. The shuttle's pilots remained at their stations, under strict orders not to interfere regardless of what they witnessed. This was between the Emperor's apprentice and the being who claimed godhood. No one else was permitted to participate. Pain waited for him at the canyon's edge. All six paths stood in formation, their identical Rinnegan eyes tracking Vader's approach with unsettling precision. The Deva path occupied the center position, flanked by the other five bodies in a pattern that maximized tactical coverage. To Vader's Force-enhanced perception, they registered as corpses, dead flesh animated by some unknown power, yet they moved with fluid grace and radiated consciousness. It was deeply wrong on a level that transcended mere technique. "You are the one they call Vader," the Deva Path stated as the Dark Lord came to a stop 20 meters away. The Emperor's enforcer, his instrument of terror. I sense great pain within you, physical agony sustained by mechanical assistance, and emotional suffering that has calcified into permanent darkness. You are a man who has known loss. And you are the being who calls himself Pain, Vader replied, his hand moving to rest on his lightsaber hilt. Who defeated 3 Inquisitors and claims to bring peace through suffering. Your philosophy is familiar. The Sith have preached similar doctrines for millennia. What makes you believe you offer anything new? The 6 paths tilted their heads in that synchronized gesture that seemed designed to unsettle. The Sith embrace pain as a path to personal power. I embrace pain as a path to universal understanding. We are not the same. Your Emperor seeks to dominate the galaxy for his own gratification, cloaking his ambition in rhetoric about order and stability. I seek to unite the galaxy in shared suffering so profound that war becomes unthinkable. One is tyranny, the other is peace. Peace through overwhelming force is still tyranny, whatever philosophy you dress it in. Vader's lightsaber ignited with a snap hiss, the crimson blade casting red light across the rocks. The Emperor has given you one opportunity to serve the greater order. I am here to determine if you are worthy of that opportunity, or if you must be eliminated. I serve no one, Pain responded, and there was absolute conviction in his voice. I am a god. Gods do not kneel to mortals, no matter how powerful they believe themselves to be. If your Emperor wishes peace, he can submit to my vision. If he refuses, he will be swept aside with all the others who perpetuate the cycle of hatred. Then we have nothing further to discuss. Vader moved with the speed of a force-enhanced warrior, closing the distance in a blur of black armor and crimson light. His lightsaber descended in a gem-so power attack, a strike powerful enough to cleave through durasteel. The Deva Path didn't dodge. Instead, it raised one hand palm forward. Shinra Tensei. The gravitational repulsion erupted between them, invisible but absolutely unstoppable. Vader felt the Force itself buckle under the technique's power, reality warping as gravity was manipulated on a fundamental level. He was thrown backward, his boots carving furrows in the rocky ground as he slid 15 meters before regaining his balance. Impressive. Vader had experienced force push from the most powerful Jedi Masters, had even felt Palpatine's own devastating repulsion techniques. This was comparable in raw power, but the mechanism was different. This wasn't the Force being shaped by will, it was something else, some other energy being converted into gravitational manipulation. Your Force is crude, the Deva Path observed. It requires emotional conviction or mental discipline to wield effectively. My Rinnegan operates beyond such limitations. Power flows through it naturally, without need for meditation or passion. This is the difference between mortal technique and divine authority. Vader responded not with words but with action. He thrust both hands forward, channeling the dark side into a force push that should have pulverized the 6 paths into paste against the canyon wall. The Preda Path stepped forward, absorbing the entire attack with its outstretched hand, the force energy dissipating harmlessly as it was converted and consumed. Energy is energy, the Preda Path said calmly. Whether you call it force or chakra, whether it stems from light or darkness, I can absorb it all. Your powers are meaningless against me. The animal path slammed its palm against the ground, summoning Jutsu. Massive clouds of smoke erupted across the battlefield. When they cleared, 3 enormous creatures stood ready. The multi-headed dog that had terrorized Imperial forces during Pain's first demonstration, a giant rhinoceros with natural armor thicker than durasteel, and a crustacean the size of a AT-AT walker with pincers that could crush starfighters. Vader assessed the battlefield with the tactical acumen that had won him countless victories. 6 humanoid opponents with synchronized movement and shared vision, plus 3 massive biological constructs that defied known science. A conventional approach would fail. He needed to identify the source of their coordination and sever it. The multi-headed dog charged first, its multiple mouths opening to reveal teeth like vibroblades. Vader extended his hand and seized it with the force, lifting the entire creature off the ground despite its massive weight. With a gesture, he hurled it toward the canyon wall. The impact should have killed it instantly. Instead, each head that was severed in the collision simply regenerated, the dog splitting into multiple smaller versions of itself that continued attacking independently. Regeneration, Vader observed, his vocabulator rendering his surprise as flat analysis. Interesting. The rhinoceros charged from his left flank while the crustacean attempted to flank right. Vader leaped high, using the force to enhance his jump to impossible heights. While airborne, he hurled his lightsaber in a spinning arc toward the animal path, the logical target, the one controlling the summons. The Asura path intercepted, its body transforming into a mechanized weapons platform. Energy cannons emerged from its torso, firing streams of concentrated destruction that forced Vader to dodge midair. The lightsaber completed its arc, but the Deva path caught it with Bancho Tenon, using gravitational attraction to redirect the weapon harmlessly past the animal path. Vader landed in a crouch, recalled his lightsaber with the Force, and immediately had to parry a barrage of micromissiles from the Asura path. Each explosion carved craters in the ground, the accumulated damage reshaping the battlefield into a moonscape of destruction. "You fight well," the Deva path acknowledged. "Better than the Inquisitors, better than most warriors I have faced. Your power is genuine, your technique refined. But you are still mortal, still bound by the limitations of flesh and machine. I am beyond such constraints." "You speak much for someone who hides behind corpse puppets," Vader retorted, deflecting another missile barrage. "Why not face me yourself, or do gods fear personal combat?" It was a calculated provocation, an attempt to goad Pain into revealing his true body's location. But the Deva path merely smiled, a cold expression devoid of real emotion. "These are not puppets. They are my 6 paths, extensions of my divine will. Each one is me, and I am all of them. There is no true body to target, no weakness to exploit. I am everywhere and nowhere, omnipresent within my domain." It was a lie. Vader could sense it through the Force. There was a central consciousness somewhere, a primary source directing these 6 bodies. But identifying it in the midst of combat while dodging summon attacks and gravitational manipulation proved challenging even for his abilities. The human path moved with blurring speed, appearing at Vader's back through some form of enhanced movement. Its hand reached for his helmet, attempting the soul extraction technique that had nearly destroyed the 5th brother. Vader spun, his lightsaber cutting through the path's arm at the elbow. The severed limb dropped to the ground, but the human path didn't even flinch. No blood emerged from the wound, just mechanical components and black rods embedded in dead flesh. It stepped back, seemingly unbothered by the injury, while the Naraka path began to glow with strange energy. "Naraka path, King of Hell," the damaged path intoned. A massive spectral entity materialized behind the Naraka path, something that resembled no creature Vader had ever encountered. It had multiple arms, grotesque features, and radiated an energy that felt fundamentally wrong to Force perception. The entity's hands closed around the human path, and when they opened moments later, the severed arm had been completely restored. Resurrection, regeneration, 6 separate bodies operating in perfect coordination, gravitational manipulation, energy absorption, summoning impossible creatures, and underneath it all, those eyes, the Rinnegan, perceiving the battlefield with clarity that matched or exceeded Vader's own Force-enhanced senses. This was not an opponent who could be defeated through superior swordsmanship or Force power alone. This required strategy, analysis, and the willingness to accept that conventional tactics would fail. Vader deactivated his lightsaber and assumed a different stance. Not the aggressive gem-so form he favored, but something more defensive, more patient. He reached deeper into the dark side, drawing on decades of pain and loss, channeling the agony of his burned body, the grief of Padmé's death, the hatred that sustained his existence. The air around him began to distort as dark side energy accumulated. Lightning crackled between his fingers, not wild and uncontrolled like the desperate burst from the fifth brother, but focused and devastating, the signature technique of the Sith perfected through years of practice. "You can absorb force energy," Vader stated, his vocabulator somehow conveying the darkness in his tone. "Let us see how much you can withstand." He unleashed a torrent of force lightning, purple-white electricity that could reduce a man to ash in seconds. The Predapath stepped forward to absorb it, and for a moment the technique worked. The lightning was drawn into its body, dissipating harmlessly. But Vader didn't stop. He poured more power into the attack, drawing on reserves of dark side energy that would have killed a lesser force user. The Predapath began to smoke, its dead flesh charring under the sustained electrical assault. The technique had limits after all. It could absorb energy, but even absorption had a threshold. The Deva Path raised both hands, Shinra Tensei enhanced. The gravitational repulsion that erupted was far more powerful than the initial demonstration. It hit Vader like a physical wall, not just pushing him back but actively crushing him with invisible force. His armor groaned under the pressure, servos screaming as they struggled to maintain function. He was driven to one knee, then both, the repulsion force threatening to flatten him completely. Through sheer will and dark side enhancement, Vader resisted. He had endured the flames of Mustafar, had survived injuries that should have killed him 10 times over. Pain was familiar territory. He embraced it, used it, let it fuel his connection to the dark side. "You cannot break me," Vader growled, forcing himself back to his feet despite the overwhelming pressure. "I have suffered more than you can possibly imagine. Your techniques are impressive, but pain is my oldest companion. It does not weaken me, it makes me stronger." The Deva Path's expression flickered, the first sign of something resembling respect. "Yes, I sense it now. You understand suffering in a way the Inquisitors did not. You have been broken and rebuilt, transformed by agony into something beyond human. In another life, we might have been allies. But not in this one." The repulsion ceased, and Vader immediately launched himself forward, moving faster than the summoned creatures could react. His target, the Deva Path itself, the primary body, the one that seemed to direct the others. His lightsaber blazed toward the Path's chest in a strike calculated to kill instantly. The human Path intercepted, taking the lightsaber through its torso. The plasma blade punched through dead flesh and mechanical components, creating a mortal wound that would have killed any living being. The human Path simply grabbed Vader's arm with both hands, holding him in place while its eyes locked onto his helmet. "You hide your face," it said. "You conceal vulnerability behind metal and circuits. Let me see what you truly are." Pain attempted the soul extraction technique on Darth Vader himself. What happened next defied both their expectations. The technique made contact with Vader's essence, that core of identity and consciousness that defined him as an individual. But unlike the fifth brother, whose soul had nearly been torn free, Vader's connection to his body was reinforced by decades of dark side immersion. His suffering, his pain, his hatred, all of it had bound him to physical existence with chains of pure dark side energy. More than that, when the human Path touched Vader's soul, it encountered something unexpected, a presence so vast, so ancient, so steeped in darkness that even Pain's divine consciousness recoiled. Emperor Palpatine had not just trained Vader, he had marked him, claimed him, bound him to servitude through Sith techniques that transcended normal force bonds. Through the soul connection, Pain experienced a fragment of Vader's existence. The fall from Jedi Knight to Sith Lord, the moment on Mustafar when his body burned, the operating table where his charred remains were rebuilt into a mechanical horror, the decades of service to an emperor who viewed him as nothing more than a useful tool. Suffering without end, pain without purpose, existence sustained only by hatred and the faint hope that one day, somehow, he might find redemption. And beneath it all, a name almost forgotten, Anakin Skywalker. The human path released Vader and staggered backward, its Rinnegan eyes wide with something resembling horror. You are not a man. You are a wound in the Force itself, a walking corpse sustained by darkness and mechanical intervention. How do you endure such existence? Vader yanked his lightsaber free from the human path's torso and stepped back, momentarily shaken by the intimate violation. No one had touched his soul like that, not even the Emperor. It was as if pain had seen everything he was, everything he had been, all the carefully buried shame and regret. "I endure because I must," Vader said, his voice somehow even more mechanical than usual. "Because my master wills it, because I have nothing else left." "That is not existence," the Devapath replied, and for the first time there was something other than cold certainty in his voice, something that might have been pity. "That is prolonged death. You serve a man who has turned you into a weapon, who sustains your suffering to maintain control. You are a slave in everything but name." "I am the Emperor's apprentice. I am the instrument of his will. I am." "You are in pain," Pain interrupted. "Constant, unending pain, physical and spiritual. I see it now. Your Emperor does not maintain your agony out of necessity. He does it deliberately, because a man in eternal suffering is easier to control than one who might find peace. He has weaponized your trauma." The words struck deeper than any physical attack could have, because they were true. Vader had always known, on some level, that Palpatine could have given him better prosthetics, could have healed more of his injuries. The Emperor's explanations about the dark side requiring suffering, about pain fueling power, had always rung slightly hollow. But acknowledging that truth would mean acknowledging that his entire existence since Mustafar had been unnecessary. That he had suffered for decades not because it was required, but because it served his master's purposes. "You understand nothing," Vader said, but there was less conviction in his voice. "I understand pain better than anyone in this galaxy," the Devapath replied. "I have made it my philosophy, my purpose, the foundation of everything I am. And I tell you now, your suffering is wasted. It serves no greater purpose, brings no lasting peace, changes nothing. You are pain without meaning, and that is the most tragic fate I have encountered." The other 5 paths had stopped attacking, their summons holding position but not advancing. This moment had transcended combat. It had become something else. A meeting of 2 beings who had made suffering their defining characteristic, who had built their entire identities around pain and what it meant. "The Emperor offers you nothing but continued torment," Pain continued. "I offer you purpose. Join me. Help me bring true peace to this galaxy. Together, we could create a system where suffering has meaning, where pain leads to understanding rather than endless servitude. Your power, combined with my vision, could." "No." The word was spoken with absolute finality. Vader reignited his lightsaber, the crimson blade humming with renewed purpose. "I have made my choices. I have walked my path. The dark side is my master now, and through it I serve the Emperor. Your philosophy is seductive, Pain, but it is still just another form of tyranny dressed as enlightenment. You would force the galaxy to suffer according to your vision, just as the Emperor forces it to submit to his rule. The methods differ, but the arrogance is identical." "Then you choose to remain a slave," the Devapath said sadly. "A tool wielded by a man who cares nothing for you beyond your utility. So be it. I offered you liberation. I offered you meaning. You rejected both. Now we finish this as enemies rather than potential allies." The battlefield erupted into chaos once more. All 6 paths attacked simultaneously, their coordination perfect. The Deva path used Shinra Tensei to create openings. The Asura path unleashed devastating firepower. The human path attempted soul extraction. The Preta path absorbed force attacks. The animal path's summons created additional threats, and the Naraka path stood ready to resurrect any fallen path. Vader met them all with the skill of a duelist who had fought and defeated hundreds of Jedi, combined with dark side power accumulated over decades. His lightsaber was a crimson blur, deflecting missiles and cutting through summoned creatures. His force abilities adapted to counter each path's specialization. When the Preta path tried to absorb his attacks, he used telekinesis instead of lightning. When gravitational manipulation threatened to crush him, he anchored himself with the Force. The canyon became a storm of destruction. Rocks shattered under stray attacks. The ground cracked and split from gravitational manipulation. Explosions carved craters deep enough to serve as graves. The Rinnegan and the Force-enhanced perception created a battle where each combatant could predict the other's moves, resulting in exchanges so fast they would have been invisible to normal observers. But neither could gain a decisive advantage. Vader could damage the paths, but the Naraka path would resurrect them. Pain could force Vader back with Shinra Tensei, but couldn't maintain the technique long enough to crush him completely. The Preta path could absorb force attacks, but Vader had decades of experience fighting without relying solely on force powers. The summoned creatures were dangerous, but Vader had faced worse during the Clone Wars. They were perfectly matched, or rather, matched well enough that victory would require one of them to make a mistake, to overextend, to take an unnecessary risk. It was Vader who blinked first. He had been fighting for nearly 30 minutes, far longer than most of his battles required. His armor's life support systems were straining, the mechanical components that kept him alive working overtime. Each breath was agony, each movement requiring more effort than the last. The dark side sustained him, but even hatred had limits. Pain, by contrast, showed no signs of fatigue. His 6 paths moved with the same precision and power they had demonstrated at the battle's beginning. Whatever sustained them, chakra, this alien energy from another dimension, it had not been exhausted by the prolonged combat. Vader recognized the tactical reality. He could not win this battle through attrition. His body would fail before Pain's techniques did, which left one option. He reached deep into the Force, drawing on every ounce of dark side power within his reach, not for attack but for perception. He extended his senses beyond the immediate battlefield, searching for what his instincts insisted must exist. The true body, the source, the one controlling the 6 paths. There, 3 kilometers away, hidden in a cave system, a presence so faint it was almost imperceptible. A life sign barely registering, a consciousness spread so thin across 6 bodies that the original form was nearly invisible to Force perception. But it was there, an emaciated, damaged body maintaining the technique through sheer willpower, and whatever power these Rinnegan eyes provided. Vader could reach it. One sustained Force attack, focused not on the paths but on their source. Kill the body, end the technique. But doing so would require abandoning his defense completely, leaving himself vulnerable to whatever final attack the 6 paths could muster. It would be a mutual kill, both of them dying in pursuit of victory. The Emperor would not approve. Palpatine wanted Pain captured or at least definitively assessed. A Pyrrhic victory where both combatants died served no one's interests but the rebel alliances. Vader made his decision. He disengaged, using the Force to launch himself backward in a massive leap that carried him dozens of meters away from the 6 paths. When he landed, he deactivated his lightsaber and raised one hand, not in attack, but in a gesture of cessation. "Enough," he said, his breathing more labored than usual. "This battle serves no purpose. We are too evenly matched. I cannot defeat you without destroying both of us in the process, and you cannot kill me without sustaining losses you may not be able to recover from. The six paths froze, their Rinnegan eyes studying Vader with that unsettling synchronized focus. For a long moment, there was only the sound of wind across barren rock and Vader's mechanical breathing. "You could have targeted my true body," the Deva Path said finally. "I sensed your perception extending toward it. You found the source, yet you chose not to strike. Why?" "Because my master would not approve of a mutual annihilation. And because," Vader paused, something unusual in his mechanical voice, "because what you said about my suffering was not entirely incorrect. I am in constant pain, yes, but perhaps there is more to existence than the Emperor has allowed me to believe." It was the closest thing to vulnerability Vader had expressed in decades, an admission that Payne's words had struck home, had planted seeds of doubt that even the dark side could not immediately suppress. "Then there is hope for you yet," Payne replied. "You are not as bound to your master as you believe, but freeing you from his control is not my primary mission. This galaxy has suffered under his rule long enough. I will bring it true peace, with or without your cooperation. And I will protect the Emperor's interests, even if I question his methods," Vader responded. "We are at an impasse. Neither of us can achieve total victory without unacceptable cost. What do you propose?" The Deva Path considered this for a moment, the other 5 paths remaining perfectly still. "A temporary truce," Payne said finally. "I require time to gather strength, to understand this galaxy's power structures more completely. You require time to report to your Emperor and reassess your strategy. We both gain nothing from further combat at this moment." "Agreed. But understand this, Payne. The Emperor will not tolerate your presence indefinitely. He will marshal forces beyond what I alone can bring to bear. Star destroyers, armies, perhaps even his own personal intervention. What will your divine power mean against planetary bombardment?" "It will mean the same thing it has always meant," the Deva Path replied with absolute certainty. "That those who rely solely on military force do not understand the true nature of peace. Your Emperor can destroy planets, but he cannot destroy the idea I represent. And ideas, once planted, are far more dangerous than any weapon." Vader nodded slowly, acknowledging the truth in that statement. He had seen it himself during the Clone Wars and the Rebellion. Ideas were indeed harder to kill than people. "Then our conflict is postponed, not concluded," Vader said. He turned toward his shuttle, then paused. "One final question. The technique you used on the human path, the one that touched my soul, you saw everything, didn't you? My past, my choices, what I was before I became this." "I saw Anakin Skywalker," Payne confirmed. "A Jedi Knight who loved too deeply, who feared loss so intensely that he embraced darkness to prevent it. A man who was manipulated by the very master he now serves. Yes, I saw everything." "Then you know why I cannot simply abandon the Emperor, why I cannot join your cause, no matter how seductive the philosophy." "I know you believe you have no other choice," the Deva Path replied, "but belief and truth are not always the same. The day will come when you must choose between continued servitude and genuine liberation. I hope, for your sake, that you choose wisely." Vader said nothing more. He simply turned and walked back toward his shuttle, his cape flowing behind him, his breathing echoing across the canyon. The 6 paths watched him go, making no move to attack or interfere. When the shuttle lifted off, ascending through Ryloth's atmosphere toward the waiting Star Destroyer, Payne remained standing at the canyon's edge. His 6 bodies stood in silent formation, contemplating the battle and what it had revealed. "The Emperor's apprentice is powerful," the Deva Path mused. "More powerful than anyone I faced in my original world, save perhaps Naruto at his peak. But he is also shackled, bound by loyalty to a master who views him as nothing more than a tool, if those chains could be broken." The thought remained unfinished. There were too many variables, too many unknowns about this galaxy and its power structures. But one thing had become clear. Simply declaring himself a god and expecting submission would not be sufficient. This galaxy had its own gods, the Emperor, the Force itself, ancient powers that predated current conflicts. To bring true peace, Pain would need to do more than demonstrate power. He would need to understand the galaxy's history, its factions, its philosophical foundations. He would need to identify the true sources of conflict and address them at their root. And most importantly, he would need allies, or at least, beings who could be turned against the current order. The battle with Vader had been educational. Now it was time to apply those lessons. In orbit, aboard his Star Destroyer, Vader stood in his meditation chamber composing his report to the Emperor. He described the battle in clinical detail, omitting nothing about Pain's capabilities or his own inability to secure victory. Palpatine valued honesty from his apprentice above empty boasts. But he also included something unusual, a personal observation. This being's philosophy may prove more dangerous than his power. He does not seek to conquer or dominate. He seeks to convert, to convince beings that his vision of peace through shared suffering is preferable to current systems. Those who are disillusioned with the Empire, who have suffered under its rule, may find his message appealing. We cannot simply crush him militarily. We must discredit his ideology before it spreads. The report was dispatched through encrypted channels to Coruscant. Vader suspected his master's response would not be pleased, but it would be truthful. And truth, even uncomfortable truth, was what the situation required. In his throne room on Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine received the report and read it 3 times, his yellow eyes gleaming with dark fascination. So, he murmured to himself, "My apprentice acknowledges he cannot easily defeat this Pain. How? Interesting. Perhaps the time has come for me to take a more direct interest in this matter. After all, if this being truly possesses power comparable to Vader's, he could prove useful, either as a weapon or as a lesson to those who would challenge the Empire." The Emperor smiled, a terrible expression that had preceded the downfall of countless adversaries. "Yes, let us see what this god is truly made of. Let us test his conviction with methods beyond simple combat. And if he proves inadequate," Palpatine's fingers crackled with Force lightning, "then at least his death will serve as entertainment." The pieces were moving into new positions. Pain and Vader had fought to a standstill, but their conflict was far from over. The Emperor's attention had been fully captured, and across the galaxy, various factions were beginning to learn of the being who claimed godhood and promised peace through suffering. The stage was set for the next act in a drama that would reshape the galaxy. The holographic transmission flickered to life in the darkest hours of Coruscant's artificial night cycle. Mon Mothma sat in the secure bunker beneath what appeared to be a legitimate trading company's headquarters, her dignified features illuminated by the blue glow of the holoprojector. Around her stood the core leadership of the Rebel Alliance: General Jan Dodonna, Admiral Jael Akbar, Bail Organa via secure connection from Alderaan, and Saw Gerrera, whose presence always brought tension to any gathering. "We've analyzed the intelligence 3 times, Dodonna said, his veteran's voice carrying the weight of decades of military experience. The being who calls himself Pain destroyed an Imperial garrison on Ryloth, defeated 3 Inquisitors without killing them, and fought Darth Vader himself to a stalemate. These are not exaggerations or propaganda. Multiple independent sources confirm the events." Admiral Akbar's amphibious features reflected concern as he studied the tactical readouts. "The techniques demonstrated defy our understanding of the Force. Gravitational manipulation on this scale, biological constructs summoned from nothing, the ability to absorb energy attacks. If even half of these reports are accurate, this being represents power comparable to the Emperor himself." "Which is precisely why we must make contact," Saw Gerrera interjected, his scarred face twisted with militant eagerness. The Empire has a new enemy, one powerful enough to challenge Vader directly. We'd be fools not to explore an alliance. We'd be greater fools to rush into partnership with someone whose motives we don't understand, Mon Mothma countered, her voice calm but firm. He speaks of peace through suffering and calls himself a god. Those are not the words of someone interested in restoring democracy or freedom. They're the words of a zealot with his own agenda. Bail Organa's hologram leaned forward, the senator's patrician features showing the strain of maintaining his double life. Mon Mothma is right to counsel caution, but we also cannot ignore the opportunity. The Empire is unsettled. For the first time since the Clone Wars ended, they face an opponent they cannot easily categorize or defeat. That uncertainty creates openings we can exploit. Exploit how? Mon Mothma asked. By recruiting him. He's already rejected Imperial overtures. What makes you think he'd be more amenable to the Alliance? Because unlike the Empire, we don't seek to dominate, Bail replied. We fight for freedom, for the restoration of the Republic. Perhaps that message will resonate where the Emperor's tyranny did not. Saw Gerrera slammed his mechanical fist on the table, his augmented breathing apparatus hissing. You're all thinking too small. This Pain doesn't want to join anyone. He wants to reshape the galaxy according to his vision. That makes him dangerous, yes, but also predictable. Point him at the Empire's infrastructure, at their symbols of power, and let him do what he does best, destroy. And when he's finished destroying Imperial targets, what then? Mon Mothma challenged. Do we simply hope he leaves us alone? That he doesn't decide the rebellion's cycle of violence needs to be broken through his particular brand of peace? The room fell silent. It was a question none of them could answer with confidence. Dodonna cleared his throat. I propose a middle path. We send a small team, not an official delegation, but individuals who can make contact, gather intelligence, and assess whether Pain represents an opportunity or a threat. If he's amenable to dialogue, we learn his true intentions. If he's hostile, we've committed minimal resources and can adjust accordingly. Who would you send? Akbar asked. This mission would require exceptional diplomatic skills combined with combat capability. We can't send senators, too high profile. But we also can't send common soldiers. They'd be outmatched if things turn violent. Before anyone could respond, a new voice entered the conversation. The holographic display expanded to include a figure that had been listening from a secure location. Ahsoka Tano, former Jedi and one of the rebellion's most valuable covert operatives. I'll go, she said simply, her distinctive head tails and facial markings giving her an almost otherworldly appearance in the hologram's blue light. I'm not officially part of the Alliance, which gives you plausible deniability. I have Force abilities, which means I can defend myself if necessary. And I've dealt with beings who claim extraordinary power before. It takes more than displays of strength to impress me. Mon Mothma studied Ahsoka's image carefully. The former Jedi had proven herself invaluable in the years since the Empire's rise, working in the shadows to undermine Imperial operations while maintaining independence from both Jedi and Sith philosophies. If anyone could approach Pain with the right mixture of respect and skepticism, it was her. You understand the risks? Mon Mothma asked. This being defeated Vader. If he decides you're a threat, then I'll be just one more casualty in the fight against tyranny, Ahsoka replied with calm acceptance. But I don't think it will come to that. From what I've read in the reports, Pain seems more interested in making philosophical points than simply killing opponents. He spared the Inquisitors when he could have easily destroyed them. He fought Vader to a stalemate and then allowed him to leave. That suggests someone who values understanding over simple violence. Or someone arrogant enough to believe he can afford mercy, Saw Gerrera muttered. Gods and their egos. Ahsoka smiled faintly. Then perhaps I can appeal to that ego. Learn what he really wants, what drives his philosophy, whether there's any common ground between his vision and ours. Mon Mothma made her decision. Very well, you have authorization to make contact, but Ahsoka, be careful. We're navigating uncharted territory here. This being is unlike anything the galaxy has encountered before. Don't let your confidence become overconfidence. Understood. I'll leave within the hour. Ahsoka's hologram flickered and vanished. The remaining leaders sat in contemplative silence for a moment before Bail Organa spoke again. We're taking a significant risk. If Pain proves hostile to the rebellion, then we'll have learned something valuable, Mon Mothma finished. Knowledge is worth the risk, and if there's even a chance he could be convinced to oppose the Empire without becoming a threat himself, we have to try. The Alliance cannot afford to ignore potential allies, no matter how unconventional. 3 days later, Ahsoka Tano's modified freighter, a nondescript YT-2400 that could pass as a common smuggler's vessel, dropped out of hyperspace in the Ryloth system. She had spent the journey reviewing every scrap of intelligence on Pain, studying the footage of his battles, analyzing the philosophy expressed in his brief declarations. What struck her most was not the power. She had witnessed immense force abilities before, had trained under Anakin Skywalker, and fought alongside the greatest Jedi of her generation. Power alone didn't impress her. No, what caught her attention was the certainty. Pain spoke with absolute conviction about his vision of peace, as if it were self-evident truth rather than philosophical position. It reminded her uncomfortably of the Jedi Council in their final years, so certain of their understanding of the Force that they couldn't see the darkness rising within their own temple. Certainty was dangerous. It led to inflexibility, to the belief that one's own perspective was the only valid interpretation of complex reality. The Jedi had paid for their certainty with near extinction. She wondered what price Pain would ultimately pay for his. Her ship's sensors detected the Imperial blockade immediately. 3 Star destroyers maintaining high orbit, their presence a clear message that Ryloth remained under lockdown following the incidents with Pain. TIE fighter patrols crisscrossed the system, and any vessel attempting planetary approach would be intercepted and searched. Ahsoka didn't bother with subtlety. She opened a general broadcast on the frequency the rebellion had identified as monitored by Pain's allies among the Twi'lek resistance. This is Ahsoka Tano. I'm here to speak with the one called Pain. I come not as an enemy, but as someone seeking understanding. If you can hear this transmission, I request an audience. I believe we have much to discuss about the nature of peace and how it might be achieved in this troubled galaxy. The response came not through standard communications, but through the Force itself. Ahsoka felt it like a ripple in a pond, something touching the edges of her awareness, examining her presence with curiosity rather than hostility. It wasn't the Force as she understood it, not exactly, but something similar enough that her Jedi training recognized it as consciousness reaching out. Then a new voice crackled through her comm system, bypassing her ship's security protocols entirely. It was the voice from the recordings, flat and emotionless, yet somehow carrying absolute authority. Ahsoka Tano, former apprentice to Anakin Skywalker who became Darth Vader, survivor of Order 66, one who walks between the light and darkness, belonging fully to neither. Yes, you are worth speaking with. Land at these coordinates. Come alone. Bring weapons if you wish. They will not save you if I decide you are a threat, but their presence or absence is irrelevant to me. Coordinates appeared on her navigation display, indicating a location in the same canyon system where Pain had fought the Inquisitors. Ahsoka considered the situation for a moment. Flying directly into a meeting with a being who had defeated Vader was objectively insane by any tactical standard. But she hadn't survived this long by playing it safe. She set course for the coordinates, her ship descending through Ryloth's atmosphere while Imperial sensors tracked her every movement. She knew they were watching, knew that Vader himself might be observing this encounter. Let them watch. Perhaps they'd learned something useful. The canyon appeared on her view screen, a desolate stretch of rocky terrain marked by recent combat damage. Craters from explosions, scorched stone from energy weapons, and the twisted wreckage of Imperial equipment scattered across the landscape. This was where gods and dark lords had clashed, where the galaxy's understanding of power had been challenged. Ahsoka landed her ship on a flat stretch of rock and powered down the engines. She took a moment to center herself, reaching out through the Force to assess the situation. What she perceived made her pause. 6 presences, all identical, all radiating that strange, not-quite-Force energy. They surrounded her landing site in a perfect hexagon, their positions calculated for optimal tactical coverage. And beneath it all, barely perceptible even to her trained senses, a 7th presence, weak, distant, but somehow controlling the other 6 like a puppeteer directing marionettes. She descended the boarding ramp with her lightsabers visible but not ignited, her white blades, symbolic of her independence from both Jedi and Sith, resting against her hips. Her montrals and headtails, the distinctive features of her Togruta heritage, picked up subtle vibrations in the air as she walked across the rocky ground. The 6 paths of pain stood waiting for her in formation, their black cloaks with red cloud patterns standing out starkly against the barren landscape. Those eyes, the Rinnegan, tracked her approach with unsettling precision. Ahsoka had seen many strange things in her years since leaving the Jedi Order, but these beings defied categorization. The Deva Path stepped forward as she approached to within 10 meters. Ahsoka Tano, you came alone as requested. That shows either courage or foolishness, perhaps both. I came seeking understanding, Ahsoka replied, her voice calm and measured. The galaxy is changing. New powers are emerging, old orders are crumbling, and beings like you appear from nowhere claiming to offer solutions. I want to know what you truly represent before deciding whether you're someone the rebellion should approach as an ally or oppose as another threat. Direct, honest, these are qualities I respect. The Deva Path gestured to a flat rock formation that could serve as informal seating. Sit. We will speak as equals or as close to equals as a mortal and a god can be. Ahsoka noted the arrogance but didn't rise to it. She had dealt with powerful beings who claimed divinity before. Words were cheap. Actions revealed truth. She sat on the indicated rock, her posture relaxed but ready, and waited for pain to make the first substantive move. The 6 paths arranged themselves around her, not threateningly, but in a formation that made clear she was completely surrounded. The Deva Path remained standing, looking down at her with those ringed eyes that seemed to perceive far more than merely physical reality. You wish to understand my philosophy, Payne said. Very well. I will explain and you will listen. Then you will decide whether your rebellion and my vision can coexist, or whether you, like the Empire, are simply another manifestation of the cycle I seek to break. Ahsoka nodded. I'm listening. In my original world, Payne began, his voice taking on the tone of someone recounting religious doctrine, I was born into a system of endless conflict. Hidden villages, each with their own military forces, engaged in perpetual war. Alliances shifted, treaties were broken, and every generation saw new conflicts arise from the ashes of the old. Peace, when it existed, was merely the interval between wars, a time for rebuilding strength before the next inevitable conflict. Sounds familiar, Ahsoka murmured. The Clone Wars, the Empire, the rebellion cycles within cycles. Precisely. I watched this cycle destroy everything I loved. My parents, killed in a war they didn't start. My best friend, murdered by those who feared our vision of peace. Everything I touched turned to ash because the fundamental problem was never addressed. Beings do not truly understand peace because they have never known shared suffering. The human path stepped forward, its expression oddly gentle for a reanimated corpse. Humans, all sentient beings, are fundamentally selfish. They care about their own pain, their own loss, their own suffering. but they cannot truly empathize with the suffering of others until they have experienced something comparable. This is why peace treaties fail, why alliances crumble, why conflicts repeat endlessly. There is no shared understanding, no universal empathy. "So your solution is to make everyone suffer?" Ahsoka asked, not judgmentally but genuinely trying to understand. "Force the galaxy to experience pain so profound that they'll be too traumatized to fight." "Not traumatized," the Devapath corrected. "Enlightened. There is a difference. Trauma without context creates only more violence, but suffering with understanding, pain that serves a purpose, agony that leads to wisdom, this transforms beings. It elevates them beyond their base nature." The Usura Path's mechanical components whirred as it gestured toward the destroyed Imperial equipment scattered across the canyon. "I could have killed every Imperial soldier I encountered. I could have devastated Lesu, left Ryloth a burning wasteland as a message to the Empire. But what would that achieve? More death, more hatred, more fuel for the cycle. Instead, I demonstrated power while sparing lives. I showed them what true force means, then allowed them to live with that knowledge. Now they understand, not intellectually, but viscerally, what it means to face something beyond their capability to resist." Ahsoka considered this carefully. "You're trying to create a deterrent. Make yourself so overwhelmingly powerful that conflict becomes pointless because everyone knows you'll intervene." "Partially correct," the Devapath acknowledged. "But it's more than deterrent. It's enlightenment through shared experience. When every being in this galaxy has felt the same overwhelming helplessness, when they all understand what it means to face annihilation and be shown mercy, they will finally comprehend peace not as the absence of conflict, but as a conscious choice to coexist." The Predapath spoke for the first time, its voice hollow like wind through a tomb. "Your Jedi Order believed in peace through detachment, through suppressing passion and emotion. They failed because they denied fundamental aspects of sentient nature. The Sith believe in peace through domination, through power crushing all opposition. They fail because oppression breeds resentment. Neither approach addresses the root cause. Beings cannot truly value peace until they understand what the alternative costs." Ahsoka felt her montrals twitch, a biological response to disturbing information. "You speak of shared suffering, but suffering isn't universal. The pain of losing a child isn't the same as the pain of losing a planet. The suffering of a slave isn't equivalent to the suffering of a ruler. How do you create shared understanding from fundamentally different experiences?" "Through scale," the Devapath replied simply. "Through demonstrating a threat so overwhelming that all other concerns pale in comparison. When every being in this galaxy, from the Emperor on his throne to the poorest slave in the Outer Rim, faces the same existential terror. When they all understand that their individual struggles are meaningless in the face of true divine power, then they will finally be equal. Equal in fear, yes, but also equal in the understanding that their survival depends on cooperation rather than conflict." The animal path moved closer, and Ahsoka noticed for the first time the strange quality of its movement, perfectly smooth, no wasted motion, as if it were recording rather than a living being. "You survived Order 66, it said. You watched your fellow Jedi slaughtered by clone troopers they had trusted. You felt betrayal, loss, grief. That suffering changed you, shaped you into what you are now. Would you undo that pain if you could?" It was a pointed question, and Ahsoka took her time answering. "I would undo the deaths, yes. I would save my friends if I could. But the lessons I learned, the growth that came from surviving, no, I wouldn't trade those. They made me who I am." "Exactly," the Devapath said with something that might have been satisfaction. "Suffering, when survived, becomes wisdom. Your pain gave you perspective the Jedi Council lacked. It freed you from dogma, allowed you to see beyond their rigid philosophy. Now imagine if everyone in this galaxy underwent similar transformation. Not the specific trauma you experienced, but equivalent understanding gained through their own encounters with overwhelming force, their own moments of facing annihilation, and being shown mercy. That's assuming your plan works, Ahsoka countered. Assuming that beings respond to trauma with wisdom rather than with more violence, more hatred, more determination to never feel helpless again. History suggests otherwise. Oppressed populations don't become peaceful, they become desperate. Terrorized people don't cooperate, they fracture into smaller groups seeking any advantage they can find. For the first time, the Deva Path's expression showed something other than certainty. A flicker of doubt, perhaps, or acknowledgement of complexity. You raise valid concerns. In my original world, my plan was to create a weapon so terrible that its mere existence would prevent conflict. A tailed beast weapon, capable of destroying entire nations in moments. The threat of mutual annihilation would force cooperation. Nuclear deterrence, Ahsoka said quietly. Mutually assured destruction. That's not new philosophy. It's been tried before in various forms. It works until it doesn't, until someone decides the cost of using the weapon is worth paying, or until an accident triggers the very catastrophe everyone feared. Which is why I do not rely solely on threat, Payne replied. I offer myself as the deterrent, as the physical manifestation of consequence. I am not a weapon that can be stolen or misused. I am a conscious force that will intervene wherever conflict arises, demonstrating again and again the futility of violence until the lesson is learned. The Naraka Path, which had remained silent throughout the conversation, finally spoke. Its voice was different from the others, deeper, more resonant, as if it spoke for something larger than itself. You question whether suffering leads to wisdom. You doubt whether fear can transform into understanding. These doubts are natural, but consider, what alternative exists? Your rebellion fights to restore democracy, to overthrow the empire. And if you succeed, how long before the next tyrant rises, the next conflict emerges, the next cycle begins? The Republic existed for 1,000 generations and still fell to corruption and war. What makes you think restoring it will be any different? It was a question Ahsoka had asked herself many times in the dark hours when hope seemed distant. The rebellion fought for something better, but was better sustainable? Could democracy truly prevent the rise of another Palpatine, another system of oppression? I don't know if it will be different, Ahsoka admitted. Maybe it won't be. Maybe we'll just replace one flawed system with another, but at least we'll have chosen it ourselves, rather than having it imposed by force. Freedom to make mistakes is still freedom. Freedom to repeat the same mistakes is not freedom. It's imprisonment within a cycle you cannot escape, the Deva Path countered. I offer liberation from that cycle. Yes, my methods involve force. Yes, my vision requires beings to submit to something greater than themselves. But the result is genuine peace, lasting peace, peace that endures because everyone understands the alternative. Peace maintained by threat isn't peace, Ahsoka said firmly. It's just a very quiet form of war where everyone is too afraid to move. That's what the Empire claims to offer, order through strength. How are you any different? Because I seek no personal gain, Payne replied with absolute conviction. The Emperor rules for his own glorification, to satisfy his hunger for power. I rule, if that word applies, only to break the cycle. Once this galaxy truly understands peace, once the lesson has been learned completely, I will no longer be necessary. I will fade into myth, a cautionary tale about what happens when conflict goes too far. Can you say the same about any galactic government in history? Ahsoka stood, her head-tails swaying as she moved. She walked a few steps away from the rock, looking out across the scarred canyon. The 6 paths didn't move to stop her, didn't even tense. They simply watched with those unnerving eyes, waiting for her response. I came here seeking understanding, she said finally. And I understand you better now. You genuinely believe your philosophy will save the galaxy. You've convinced yourself that imposing suffering serves a greater good. And maybe, in some abstract philosophical sense, you have valid points about cycles of violence and the limits of conventional peace. She turned back to face the Deva Path directly. But here's what you don't understand. Beings don't want to be saved by gods. They want to save themselves. The Jedi failed partly because they positioned themselves as guardians rather than partners, as beings above rather than among the population. You're making the same mistake on a larger scale. You're trying to impose enlightenment, force wisdom, compel understanding. That's not how growth works. That's not how lasting change happens. Then how does it happen? The Deva Path challenged. Through democracy, through hope, through the rebellion's idealistic vision of freedom. How many must die in the name of self-determination before you admit that perhaps some guidance, some intervention is necessary? I don't know, Ahsoka said honestly. Maybe thousands more will die before we find a better way. Maybe the rebellion will fail and the Empire will continue for generations. Maybe another Dark Lord will rise after Palpatine falls. But at least those futures will be ours to face, to adapt to overcome in our own ways. Your path offers certainty at the cost of agency. I'd rather face an uncertain future we shape ourselves than a certain future shaped by divine intervention. The 6 paths were silent for a long moment. Then the Deva Path did something unexpected. He smiled. It was a cold expression devoid of warmth, but it carried a hint of respect. You speak with conviction born from experience. You have suffered, learned, and emerged with your own philosophy. In another context, we might have been allies, but our paths diverge here. You choose to trust in beings' capacity for growth without intervention. I have seen too much to share that trust. So where does that leave us? Ahsoka asked. Are we enemies now? Will you target the rebellion as another manifestation of the cycle? No, Payne replied. Your rebellion is not my primary concern. You fight the Empire, which itself is a symptom of the larger problem. When I address the disease, the symptoms will resolve themselves. But neither will I aid you. Your methods, your philosophy, your faith in conventional solutions, these are precisely what must be transcended. I will not hinder you, but I will not help you either. What will you do then? The Deva Path looked toward the sky, where Imperial star destroyers hung in orbit like metal moons. I will continue demonstrating what true power means. I will force the Emperor and his servants to recognize that their military might is insufficient. I will create situations where the galaxy must choose. Continue the cycle of violence, or submit to a new order where conflict becomes impossible. And eventually, when enough beings have faced that choice and understood its implications, peace will emerge, not because I force it, but because they finally comprehend there is no alternative. That's still forcing it, Ahsoka pointed out, just with extra steps. Perhaps, but it is the only path I can see that leads to lasting peace. Your path, restoration of democracy, faith in freedom, hope that beings will choose cooperation. I have watched that path fail in my original world. I will not watch it fail here as well. Ahsoka realized there was nothing more to be gained from this conversation. They had reached the fundamental impasse. Payne believed in imposed order through overwhelming force, while she believed in freedom even with all its messy complications. Neither would convince the other. Then I'll deliver your message to the rebellion, she said. You're not an ally, but you're not actively hostile either. You'll pursue your own agenda and we'll pursue ours. If our paths cross, she left the implication hanging. If our paths cross, I will do what I must to achieve my vision, the Deva Path finished. As will you. We are both committed to our philosophies, both willing to sacrifice for what we believe is right. In that sense, we are remarkably similar, even if our methods and goals differ dramatically. Ahsoka walked back toward her ship, then paused. One more thing. You mentioned your original world, the suffering you experienced there. What happened to it? Did your plan work? Did you achieve your version of peace? The Deva Path's expression became unreadable. I was interrupted. My plan was not fully realized before I was brought to this galaxy. Whether it would have succeeded remains an open question. Then you're experimenting, Ahsoka said, understanding dawning. You don't actually know if your philosophy works at full scale. You believe it will, but you've never seen it through to completion. You're testing a theory on an entire galaxy. And your rebellion is not testing theories, Paine countered. You have no guarantee democracy will succeed where the Republic failed. You have no proof that freedom produces lasting peace. We are both operating on faith in our respective philosophies, both gambling with galactic futures based on convictions we cannot definitively prove. The difference is that I acknowledge this uncertainty and proceed anyway, while you pretend your path is somehow less speculative than mine. It was a fair point, and Ahsoka had to acknowledge it. You're right. We're both taking leaps of faith. I just hope, for the galaxy's sake, that at least one of us is right. Because if we are both wrong, the galaxy continues its cycle of suffering indefinitely, the Deva Path said quietly. Which is precisely why I cannot afford to fail. This galaxy deserves better than endless repetition of the same conflicts. Whether they want my intervention or not, they will receive it, because gods do not ask permission to save their creations. Ahsoka climbed the boarding ramp of her ship, then turned for one final look at the 6 paths of pain standing in the barren canyon. They looked like statues more than living beings, monuments to a philosophy born from trauma and absolute conviction. For what it's worth, she called down, I understand why you believe what you believe. Your suffering shaped you, gave you purpose. But suffering alone doesn't grant wisdom. Context does, reflection does, the willingness to question your own certainty does. If you ever doubt your path, if you ever wonder whether there might be alternatives you haven't considered, well, you know how to reach the rebellion. I do not doubt, Paine replied simply. Gods cannot afford doubt, but your words are noted, Ahsoka Tano. Perhaps in time, when this galaxy has been transformed, we will speak again and you will understand what I have accomplished. Or I'll be dead in a crater somewhere, another casualty of your grand experiment, Ahsoka said, though without bitterness. Either way, may the Force be with you, or whatever power sustains you. And may your path lead to enlightenment, even if you refuse to accept it when offered. The boarding ramp closed, and Ahsoka's ship lifted off, ascending through Ryloth's atmosphere toward hyperspace and the waiting rebellion. As she flew, she composed her report mentally, trying to find words adequate to describe what she had encountered. Paine wasn't evil, not in the conventional sense. He didn't seek power for its own sake, didn't revel in cruelty, didn't enjoy causing suffering. In his own twisted way, he genuinely believed he was saving the galaxy from itself, which made him more dangerous than simple villains, because true believers were always more difficult to stop than opportunists. The rebellion would have to factor this into their calculations. Paine represented a wild card in the galactic struggle, neither ally nor enemy, but a force pursuing his own agenda with absolute conviction. How that would intersect with the Alliance's goals remained uncertain. In the canyon below, the 6 paths of pain stood motionless long after Ahsoka's ship vanished into hyperspace. Through their shared consciousness, Nagato contemplated the conversation, analyzing every word for insight into this galaxy's mindset. She speaks of freedom, but freedom without guidance leads only to chaos, the Deva Path murmured. She speaks of choice, but choices made in ignorance perpetuate suffering. And yet, she survived Order 66, adapted, grew beyond her Jedi training. Perhaps there is wisdom in her path, even if I cannot embrace it. The thought was uncomfortable, threatening the absolute certainty that had sustained him through years of pain and loss. But Paine had learned long ago to embrace discomfort, to use doubt as fuel rather than weakness. If Ahsoka's words had planted seeds of uncertainty, he would examine those seeds carefully, water them with reflection, and see what grew. If nothing else, she had confirmed what he suspected. This galaxy would not submit easily to his vision. The Empire resisted, the rebellion resisted, even individual Force users like Ahsoka resisted. Imposing peace would require more than demonstrations of power. It would require strategy, patience, and perhaps perhaps a willingness to adapt his methods even if his ultimate goal remained unchanged. The Emperor next, he decided. If I can break his regime, shatter the symbol of tyrannical peace, perhaps then the galaxy will be ready to hear my message. And if not, the Deva Path's Rinnegan eyes gleamed with cold determination. Then I will make them ready, whatever the cost. Above Ryloth, Imperial sensors tracked Ahsoka's departure and immediately transmitted the data to Coruscant. In his throne room, Emperor Palpatine reviewed the recording of her meeting with Pain. Imperial intelligence had deployed remote surveillance despite the difficulty. Fascinating, the Emperor whispered, his yellow eyes gleaming with dark amusement. This Pain speaks of peace through suffering, while the former Jedi speaks of freedom through sacrifice. Both are fools, but useful fools. Let them dance their philosophical dance while I prepare my next move. If Pain seeks to challenge my empire. Palpatine's smile was terrible to behold. Then I shall teach him what true power means. No god has ever withstood the dark side when properly applied. And I have been perfecting my methods for decades. The pieces continued to move across the galactic board. Pain had rejected the rebellion's potential alliance. Ahsoka had delivered her assessment. The Empire prepared its next move. And across the galaxy, billions of beings remained unaware that their futures were being shaped by beings who claimed to know what was best for them, whether they wanted such guidance or not. The stage was set for the next confrontation, and when it came, the galaxy would learn whether gods or emperors would prevail. The summons arrived in the dead of night, carried by an encrypted transmission that bypassed every security protocol in the Imperial chain of command. Grand Moff Tarkin stood on the command deck of his personal Star Destroyer, the Executrix, reading the message with the cold, analytical precision that had made him one of the Empire's most effective administrators. Immediate deployment to Coruscant, priority Alpha Omega, all senior command staff, by order of Emperor Palpatine. Alpha Omega classification meant a gathering of the Empire's absolute elite, the Grand Moffs, the senior admirals, the Inquisitorious leadership, and of course, Darth Vader. Such assemblies occurred perhaps once or twice per year, reserved for matters of galactic significance. The last one had been to discuss the Death Star project, Tarkin's own vision of ultimate Imperial power. What could possibly warrant such a gathering now? Tarkin had his suspicions. The intelligence reports filtering up through command channels all referenced the same phenomenon, a being of extraordinary power appearing on Ryloth, defeating Imperial forces and Inquisitors with contemptuous ease, fighting Darth Vader to a standstill, and most disturbingly, propagating a philosophy that threatened Imperial stability more than any rebel attack could. Pain, the self-proclaimed god who spoke of peace through suffering. Tarkin adjusted his uniform with meticulous precision and strode toward the communication station. Set course for Coruscant maximum hyperdrive, and inform my staff, this is not a drill. The Emperor is assembling his war council. 72 hours later, the Imperial Palace's Grand Strategy Chamber contained the most powerful collection of Imperial leadership ever assembled in one location. The circular room, designed to project holographic displays from its center, was ringed by seats occupied by beings who commanded fleets, controlled sectors, and held the power of life and death over trillions. Grand Moff Tarkin sat in his designated position, his angular features betraying nothing of his thoughts. Around the circle, Admiral Thrawn, his red eyes gleaming with analytical interest, Grand Admiral Tag, veteran of 1,000 campaigns, Director Krennic of the Imperial Military Department of Advanced Weapons Research, ISB Director Yularen, overseeing internal security, and a dozen other senior commanders whose names were synonymous with Imperial power. The Inquisitors stood behind Vader's empty chair, the third sister, seventh sister, fifth brother, and 4 others who had been summoned from various hunting assignments across the galaxy. They maintained rigid attention, though Tarkin noted with interest that the third sister showed signs of lingering trauma. Her posture was correct, but her eyes held something he had never seen in an Inquisitor before: doubt. The chamber's grand doors opened, and Darth Vader entered. The Dark Lord's mechanical breathing immediately dominated the acoustic space, his black armor seeming to absorb light as he strode to his position at the Emperor's right hand. No one spoke. Vader required no introduction, no announcement. His presence was authority manifest. Finally, Emperor Palpatine emerged from his private entrance, supported by his black cane but radiating such dark side power that even the non-force sensitives in the room felt their skin crawl. He moved to his throne at the circle's head, his hooded features barely visible in the dim red lighting he preferred. "My loyal servants," Palpatine began, his voice somehow penetrating to every corner of the vast chamber despite being barely above a whisper. "I have gathered you here to address a threat unlike any the Empire has faced since its founding. A threat that is not merely military but philosophical, not simply powerful but transformative. A threat that, if left unchecked, could undermine everything we have built." The Emperor gestured, and the central holographic display activated. It showed footage from Ryloth, Payne's arrival, the destruction of the Imperial garrison, the defeat of the Inquisitors, and most significantly, the battle between Vader and the Six Paths of Pain. The assembled commanders watched in silence as techniques beyond their understanding reshaped the battlefield. "This being calls himself Pain," Palpatine continued. "He claims to be a god from another dimension. He speaks of bringing peace through suffering, of breaking cycles of violence through overwhelming force. His power is considerable, enough to fight Lord Vader to a standstill, enough to defeat multiple Inquisitors without killing them, enough to destroy military installations with apparent ease." Tarkin leaned forward slightly, his voice cutting through the chamber with characteristic precision. "Your Majesty, if I may, what is the nature of this being's power? The footage shows techniques that do not conform to any known force abilities. Gravitational manipulation on this scale should be impossible without massive technological support, yet he appears to generate it through pure will." Vader's mechanical breathing punctuated the silence before the Dark Lord spoke. "He does not use the Force as we understand it. His power, he calls it the Rinnegan, granted by eyes that perceive reality differently than normal vision. It operates by principles foreign to this galaxy, drawn from some energy source that resembles the Force but follows different rules." "Can such power be countered?" Admiral Thrawn asked, his tone carrying genuine scientific curiosity rather than fear. "Every technique has limitations, every ability has vulnerabilities. What are his?" "His true body is distant," Vader replied. "The six figures we fight are corpses, dead flesh animated through some form of remote control. Kill them and they are resurrected by one of their number. But the consciousness controlling them originates elsewhere, from a damaged physical form that sustains the technique. If that primary body could be located and destroyed, the threat would end." "Then deploy Hunter-Seeker teams," Grand Admiral Tagg suggested. "Saturate Ryloth with surveillance, scan every cave system, leave no stone unturned until we find this primary body. Orbital bombardment if necessary." "No," the Emperor's word cut through the strategic discussion like a vibroblade. "You think too conventionally, Admiral. This being is not a rebel cell to be rooted out, not a Jedi fugitive to be hunted. He is a symbol, a philosophy made manifest. Killing his body may end his personal threat, but it will not end what he represents." Palpatine stood with surprising vigor, his cane striking the floor with emphasis. "He speaks of peace through suffering. He claims the Empire's order is false, that our system perpetuates cycles of violence. And there are those, worlds ground under Imperial occupation, beings who have suffered losses to our policies, who might find such a message appealing. We cannot simply destroy him. We must discredit him, prove his philosophy hollow, demonstrate that the Empire's vision is superior." Director Krennic cleared his throat. "The Death Star project nears completion, Your Majesty. When operational, it will serve as the ultimate demonstration of Imperial power. No being, no matter how powerful individually, can stand against a weapon capable of destroying entire planets. Perhaps this pain merely requires a demonstration of scale. Your battle station is years from completion, Tarkin interjected with barely concealed disdain for Krennic's timeline optimism. And using it against a single individual would be like hunting insects with turbolasers, possible but absurd. No, we require something more surgical, more personal. The Emperor returned to his throne, steepling his withered fingers. I have considered various approaches. Direct military assault will fail. He has already proven capable of defeating conventional forces. Assassination would be difficult and might transform him into a martyr. Negotiation has been rejected. He will not serve the Empire or any authority but his own conviction. Then what do you propose, Master? Vader asked. Palpatine's smile was terrible to behold. I propose we give him exactly what he claims to want. He seeks to demonstrate the futility of violence, to make the galaxy understand suffering. Very well. We will create a situation where his philosophy is tested against reality. We will force him to make choices that reveal the limitations of his beliefs. And when he fails, when his vision proves inadequate to the complexities of actual governance, we will be there to highlight that failure to the entire galaxy. A trap, Thrawn said, understanding dawning in his red eyes. But what form would such a trap take? What situation would test his philosophy while simultaneously exposing its weaknesses? The Emperor's yellow eyes gleamed with dark satisfaction. Lord Vader, you touched his consciousness during your battle. You experienced his memories, his past, the trauma that shaped his philosophy. Tell them what you learned. Vader's respirator hissed before he spoke, his mechanical voice carrying uncharacteristic weight. He suffered greatly in his original world, lost his parents to war, watched his closest friend die, was manipulated by those he trusted. His philosophy emerged from a desire to prevent others from experiencing similar pain. He genuinely believes that forcing the galaxy to understand suffering will create lasting peace. A broken child playing God, Tarkin observed coldly. His trauma drives his conviction, which means his decisions will be emotional rather than rational, reactive rather than strategic. Such beings can be manipulated. Precisely, Palpatine confirmed. We will present him with a dilemma that tests the core of his philosophy, a situation where his intervention causes more suffering than it prevents, where his actions create the very cycle he seeks to break. And we will ensure the entire galaxy watches as his divine certainty crumbles. ISB Director Yularen spoke for the first time, his veteran intelligence officer's mind already working through scenarios. What specific situation did you have in mind, Your Majesty? The planet Lothal, Palpatine said, and several commanders shifted in recognition of the name. A minor industrial world with growing rebel sympathies, currently under Governor Price's administration. Imperial presence is significant but not overwhelming. The local population chafes under occupation but lacks the means to effectively resist. Perfect conditions for our purposes. I fail to see how Lothal serves as a trap, Krennic said, confused. Vader answered before the Emperor could. Because we will stage a crisis. A situation where Imperial forces appear to be massacring civilians, but where Payne's intervention will trigger actual massacres he cannot prevent. We will create a scenario where his actions directly cause the suffering he claims to oppose. A false flag operation, Thrawn said, his analytical mind appreciating the strategic elegance. We publicize rumors that the Empire plans to execute Lothal's population as punishment for rebel activity. Payne, acting on his philosophy, intervenes to prevent the massacre. But his intervention triggers contingency protocols that actually cause civilian casualties, casualties that would not have occurred if he had remained uninvolved, thus demonstrating that his interference creates more problems than it solves. Tarkin finished, nodding approval. The galaxy witnesses a self-proclaimed god failing to prevent suffering despite, or because of, his intervention. His credibility collapses, his philosophy is revealed as naive idealism, and the Empire emerges as the stable force that would have maintained order if not for outside interference. The third sister, who had remained silent throughout the strategic discussion, finally spoke. He will sense deception. His Rinnegan perceives reality with extraordinary clarity. Simple lies will not fool him. Which is why the deception must be layered, Palpatine replied. The initial crisis will be genuine. Governor Price will receive orders to prepare for mass executions, orders that will be leaked through channels Pain monitors. Imperial forces will mobilize as if genuinely planning atrocities. Every aspect will be authentic except the final execution order, which will never actually be given. Pain will intervene against a threat that appears real but was never truly going to occur. And when he intervenes, the seventh sister asked. Contingencies activate, the Emperor said simply. Hidden explosive devices in civilian centers, triggered to appear as if Pain's techniques caused collateral damage. Sleeper agents among the population, activated to create chaos that seems to result from his interference. Imperial forces responding to his attack in ways that accidentally harm civilians. Every tragedy carefully orchestrated to appear as if Pain's actions directly caused outcomes he was trying to prevent. It was, Tarkin had to admit, brilliantly cruel. They would use Pain's own philosophy against him, create a situation where his intervention, his attempt to prevent suffering, would appear to cause exponentially greater suffering. The psychological impact on a being whose entire identity revolved around bringing peace through controlled suffering would be devastating. There are risks, Admiral Thrawn observed. If Pain perceives the deception before the trap springs, he could turn the situation against us. Expose Imperial manipulation on a galactic stage, rally support by revealing our willingness to sacrifice civilian lives for strategic advantage. A risk I am willing to accept, Palpatine said, because even exposure serves a purpose. If Pain reveals our trap, he must explain how he discovered it, which requires admitting he was monitoring Imperial communications, preparing to interfere in Imperial governance. Either outcome advances our goals. He fails and is discredited, or he succeeds and is revealed as someone who spies on legitimate government operations. Vader shifted in his seat, his mask turning toward the Emperor. Master, if I may, during our battle I sensed something in Pain, a capacity for reflection, for doubt beneath the certainty. He has questioned his own philosophy, wondered if perhaps his path contains flaws. If he experiences catastrophic failure on Lothal, if his intervention causes massive civilian casualties, it may break him psychologically as well as politically. Excellent, Palpatine purred. A broken god is more useful than a dead one. If Pain can be shattered and rebuilt, he could potentially serve the Empire. His power, redirected toward Imperial purposes, would be invaluable. And if he cannot be rebuilt, the Emperor's shrug was eloquent. Then at least his failure will serve as a lesson to others who might challenge Imperial authority with philosophical alternatives. The strategy was set. Now came the implementation details. The complex orchestration required to make the trap appear natural, to create a crisis compelling enough to draw Pain's intervention, while maintaining operational security that prevented premature discovery. Governor Price will receive her orders within the standard day, Palpatine announced. The execution preparations will begin. Leaked intelligence will flow through monitored channels, and Imperial forces will position themselves according to contingency protocols. Lord Vader, you will maintain distance but remain ready to respond if Pain's reaction exceeds parameters. Inquisitors, you will pose as civilian targets, ready to trigger contingencies when Pain makes his move. And if he doesn't take the bait, Director Yularen asked. He will, Vader said with certainty. He cannot resist. His entire philosophy requires intervention to prevent suffering. Presented with apparent Imperial atrocities, He must act or admit his principles are hollow. His conviction will damn him. The meeting continued for another 2 hours, refining details, assigning responsibilities, ensuring every element of the operation was properly coordinated. When finally dismissed, the Imperial leadership dispersed to their various duties, each carrying their piece of the strategy that would test whether gods or emperors truly ruled the galaxy. Only Vader remained, standing before the Emperor's throne after the others had departed. "You have concerns, my apprentice?" Palpatine asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "Pain spoke truth during our battle," Vader said slowly. "About my suffering, about how you maintain it for control. He offered me purpose beyond servitude. I rejected him, but..." His words linger. "As they should," Palpatine replied, surprisingly candid. "Pain is dangerous precisely because he offers genuine belief, authentic conviction. Unlike rebel idealism or Jedi dogma, his philosophy is built on lived experience. That makes it compelling even to those like yourself who have been thoroughly broken and rebuilt. Did you truly maintain my suffering unnecessarily? Would you prefer comforting lies, my apprentice, or uncomfortable truth?" When Vader didn't respond, Palpatine continued. "Yes, your injuries could have been better healed. Your prosthetics could be more sophisticated. Your pain could be reduced significantly. But pain serves you, Vader. It fuels your connection to the dark side, maintains your hatred, prevents the weakness of hope from corrupting your focus. I did not damage you, Obi-Wan did that. But I chose not to fully repair you, because the broken weapon is often more deadly than the pristine one." The revelation should have sparked rage, should have driven Vader to attack, but he remained still, processing the admission. "You use me," he said finally. "I use everyone," Palpatine replied matter-of-factly. "That is what power means. The difference is that you are my apprentice, my chosen instrument, elevated above all others. Your suffering has purpose. It makes you stronger, more focused, more capable of enforcing my will. Would you truly trade that strength for comfort, for the weakness of living without pain?" It was a question Vader couldn't answer, not honestly. His pain defined him, gave him identity, maintained his connection to the dark side that was now his only source of power. Without it, what would he be? A broken man with pleasant prosthetics, a weakling unable to channel the hatred that made him formidable. "I thought not," Palpatine said, reading his apprentice's silence correctly. "Which is why Pain's philosophy, for all its conviction, will ultimately fail. He seeks to impose suffering as teaching tool, as path to enlightenment. But suffering without hatred, pain without the dark side to channel it, is merely torment. I have given your suffering purpose. He offers only suffering for its own pedagogical sake. The galaxy will reject his vision because beings do not want to suffer for abstract principles. They want their pain to mean something personal, something immediate." "Then why the elaborate trap on Lothal?" Vader asked. "If his philosophy will naturally fail, why not simply wait?" "Because I am not a patient man," Palpatine said with dark amusement, "and because allowing him to continue unopposed sends the wrong message. The Empire does not wait for threats to resolve themselves. We actively shape outcomes, bend reality to our will. Pain will learn that lesson on Lothal, where his certainty meets complexity and crumbles." Vader bowed. "As you command, Master." "Go, my apprentice, prepare for deployment. And Vader," the Emperor's voice carried warning, "if Pain's words have truly planted doubt in your mind, use that doubt. Let it fuel your hatred, transform uncertainty into rage. Show me that my faith in you, my decision to leave you broken rather than fully healed, was correct. Show me that you are still the weapon I forged from Anakin Skywalker's ashes." "I will not fail you," Vader said, though whether he spoke to convince his master or himself remained unclear. On Ryloth, 3 days later, Pain's surveillance network detected unusual Imperial communications. The 6 paths gathered around a stolen Imperial terminal, their Rinnegan eyes scanning the intercepted transmissions with perfect attention. Governor Price of Lothal has received orders for mass executions, the Deva Path read aloud. 200,000 civilians, punishment for alleged rebel sympathies. Executions scheduled to begin in 7 standard days. All Imperial forces in the sector are being mobilized. The human path accessed corroborating intelligence from other sources, rebel intercepts, civilian distress signals, independent news networks picking up rumors of the impending atrocity. Everything confirmed the same story. The Empire planned to massacre Lothal's population as an example to other worlds considering resistance. This is what empires do, the Deva Path said, his voice carrying cold certainty. They maintain power through terror, through demonstrating that rebellion carries costs so terrible that submission becomes the only rational choice. It is the cycle made manifest, violence begetting violence, suffering without purpose, pain that serves only to perpetuate itself. We must intervene, the Animal Path stated. This is precisely the situation our philosophy was designed to address. We demonstrate greater power, stop the massacre, and show both the Empire and its victims that there are forces in this galaxy stronger than Imperial tyranny. Agreed, the Preta Path said. The Empire uses fear as a weapon. We will break that weapon, prove that their threats are empty when faced with true divine power. But the Usura Path, ever analytical, raised a concern. The timing seems convenient. We have been on Ryloth for weeks. The Empire knows our location, knows our philosophy, knows we cannot ignore such blatant atrocity. This could be an attempt to draw us into unfavorable circumstances. A trap, the Deva Path considered. Possible, but even if it is a trap, what choice do we have? Allow 200,000 innocents to die simply because opposing their deaths might be strategically disadvantageous. That would make us no better than the Empire itself, placing strategic considerations above moral imperatives. The Naraka Path, which spoke rarely but always with weight, offered its perspective. If we do not act, we prove our philosophy is hollow. We claim to oppose cycles of violence, yet we would stand aside while violence unfolds because we fear manipulation. Inaction is also a choice, and that choice has consequences. Through Nagato's shared consciousness, the 6 paths reached consensus. They would intervene on Lothal. They would stop the executions. They would demonstrate that the Empire's power was not absolute, that beings existed who would oppose tyranny regardless of personal risk. If it was a trap, they would spring it deliberately, knowing the danger but judging the moral imperative more important than tactical caution. Prepare for deployment, the Deva Path commanded. We leave for Lothal within the hour, and if the Empire truly believes they can trap a god, the Rinnegan gleamed with cold fire. Then they will learn the cost of such hubris. The 6 paths of pain moved as one, beginning preparations for the journey to Lothal. They did not know, could not know, that every step they took was precisely what Emperor Palpatine had predicted, that their moral certainty was being used as a weapon against them, that their intervention would create the very suffering they sought to prevent. The trap was set. The bait had been taken, and when it sprung, the galaxy would witness whether gods or emperors truly understood the nature of peace. In his throne room on Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine sensed through the Force the moment Pain made his decision. The dark side rippled with satisfaction as pieces moved exactly as predicted. "Yes," he whispered to the darkness. "Come, Pain. Come to Lothal and show the galaxy what your philosophy means. Come and learn that conviction without wisdom is merely another form of blindness. Come and break yourself upon the reality of consequences you cannot control." The die was cast, the stage was set, and Lothal would become the crucible where God philosophy met Imperial strategy, where one would emerge triumphant and the other would be revealed as nothing more than naive idealism dressed in divine rhetoric. The countdown had begun. The 6 paths of pain materialized on Lothal's surface through a combination of the animal path's giant bird summon and carefully calculated hyperspace coordinates. They arrived 3 days before the scheduled executions, landing in the agricultural zones outside Capital City, where Imperial surveillance was lighter. The Rinnegan perceived everything with crystalline clarity, the fear radiating from the population, the heavy Imperial military presence, the preparations that seemed unmistakably authentic. Governor Price had performed her role flawlessly. Detention centers overflowed with civilians marked for execution. Stormtroopers patrolled the streets in force. Gallows and firing squad stations were being constructed in public squares with deliberate visibility. Every detail screamed genuine Imperial atrocity in preparation. Payne watched from the outskirts, his 6 bodies positioned to observe multiple areas simultaneously. Through shared vision, Nagato analyzed the situation with the tactical precision born from years of combat experience. The Imperial forces were deployed defensively, as if expecting resistance but confident in their overwhelming numbers. Standard occupier behavior, brutal but predictable. 200,000 marked for death, the Devapath murmured. Children among them, families, beings whose only crime was existing in a system that bred resentment. This is the peace the Empire offers, submission or annihilation. The human path moved through crowds in disguise, touching minds, reading surface thoughts. The fear was genuine. The despair was real. Parents clutched children, lovers whispered final words, elderly beings faced death with weary resignation. If this was theater, the actors believed their roles completely. 24 hours before the scheduled executions, Payne made his move. The 6 paths converged on Capital City from multiple directions simultaneously. The Devapath walked straight through the main gate, Shinra Tensei deflecting blaster fire and hurling stormtroopers aside like toys. The Usura Path assaulted the garrison command center, its mechanical weapons carving through Imperial defenses. The Animal Path's summons created chaos throughout the city, the multi-headed dog rampaging through military installations, the giant bird extracting civilians from detention centers. "I am Payne," the Devapath's voice boomed across the city, amplified through stolen Imperial speakers. "I am the god who brings true peace. Your executions will not proceed. Your tyranny ends here. Witness what happens when mortals challenge divine authority." It was magnificent, overwhelming, exactly the kind of demonstration his philosophy required. Imperial forces scrambled to respond, but they were outmatched at every position. The Preta Path absorbed energy weapons fire. The human path extracted information from captured officers. The Naraka Path stood ready to resurrect any fallen path. Governor Price, watching from her command center, activated the prepared signal, a single encrypted burst transmission that Imperial forces across Lothal recognized as their cue. What happened next occurred in horrifying synchronization. Explosive charges hidden in civilian shelters, ostensibly protection from the executions but actually Imperial plants, detonated simultaneously across the city. Not in military areas where Payne was fighting, but in residential districts, marketplaces, schools, places where civilians had gathered believing they were safe from the violence. The blasts killed thousands in the first 30 seconds. Simultaneously, Imperial forces began retreating through civilian areas, their retreat paths carefully calculated to draw Payne's counterattacks through populated zones. When the Usura Path fired missiles to stop the retreating troops, the projectiles that missed their military targets struck apartment complexes. When the Deva Path used Shinra Tensei to repel an Imperial assault, the gravitational wave collapsed buildings that civilians were sheltering inside. Sleeper agents among the civilian population activated, creating panic that drove crowds into carefully prepared kill zones. What appeared to be civilians fleeing Payne's battle were actually being herded toward areas where Imperial accidents would cause maximum casualties. Payne's Rinnegan perceived the deaths, hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands. But the chaos made causality impossible to determine. Were these Imperial actions collateral damage from his own techniques, deliberate massacres, or tragic accidents born from combat in populated areas? "Stop," the Devapath commanded, suspending his assault. "Cease all attacks. Civilians are dying." But stopping didn't help. More explosions rippled through the city, charges timed to detonate whether Pain fought or withdrew. Collapsing infrastructure crushed evacuees. Fires spread through residential areas. Imperial forces continued their panicked retreat, each movement calculated to create maximum civilian casualties while appearing to be defensive responses to Pain's aggression. Through the shared consciousness of the Rinnegan, Nagato experienced a horror beyond anything he had known. This was worse than the deaths in his original world because here, his intervention, his attempt to prevent suffering, was being weaponized to create exponentially greater suffering. The human path touched the mind of a dying Imperial officer and extracted the truth. The trap, the deception, the carefully orchestrated catastrophe designed to make Pain's intervention appear to cause the very massacre he tried to prevent. "We've been used," the Devapath whispered, and for the first time since awakening the Rinnegan, Nagato felt something he thought he had transcended: helplessness. He could level the entire city with Chibaku Tensei, but that would kill everyone, civilians and Imperial forces alike. He could continue fighting, but every technique he used could be turned against innocents. He could withdraw, but the explosions were already preset, the civilians already dying, and retreat would appear to be abandonment. There was no winning move. The Emperor had created a perfect trap, a situation where intervention and non-intervention both led to catastrophic suffering, where Pain's actions and inactions were equally damning. In orbit, Darth Vader watched through fleet surveillance, his feelings a complex mixture of professional appreciation for the trap's elegance and something uncomfortable that might have been sympathy for Pain's impossible situation. The final toll, when the chaos subsided 6 hours later, exceeded 70,000 civilian deaths. Imperial propaganda networks immediately broadcast footage showing Pain's techniques destroying civilian infrastructure, his summons rampaging through residential areas, his intervention triggering the very massacre he claimed to prevent. The Devapath stood in the ruins of capital city's central square, surrounded by devastation, his Rinnegan eyes reflecting fires that burned across Lothal. Around him, survivors screamed accusations. Imperial forces maintained distance, allowing civilians to confront the god who had failed them. "You said you would save us," a Twi'lek mother shrieked, clutching her dead child. "You said you brought peace. Look what your peace brought. Look what your intervention cost." Pain had no answer. For the first time in years, Nagato's absolute certainty fractured. His philosophy, that overwhelming power could break cycles of violence, that forcing beings to understand suffering would create lasting peace, had been turned into a weapon that created the very suffering it was meant to prevent. The Six Paths withdrew from Lothal in silence, carrying the weight of 70,000 deaths. Imperial forces did not pursue. They didn't need to. The damage was done, not to Imperial infrastructure, but to Pain's credibility, his philosophy, his divine certainty. Emperor Palpatine watched the broadcasts with dark satisfaction, his yellow eyes gleaming. And so the god learns humility. Conviction is not enough. Power is not enough. Only understanding, true understanding of complexity, of consequence, of the limits of ideology, separates rulers from pretenders. Across the galaxy, beings watched the footage and drew their own conclusions. Some saw Imperial manipulation. Others saw a dangerous being whose interference caused catastrophe. Most simply saw another tragedy in a galaxy full of them, more proof that peace, whether through freedom or force or divine intervention, remained eternally elusive. Pain returned to Ryloth a changed being. His philosophy hadn't been proven wrong, but it had been proven insufficient. The Emperor had taught him a terrible lesson, that conviction without wisdom, power without understanding of complexity, intervention without consideration of consequence, led only to new forms of suffering. The question now was whether Pain would learn from this failure or be broken by it, whether he would adapt his philosophy or abandon it, whether he would continue his mission or withdraw from a galaxy too complex for divine simplicity. The answer would shape everything that followed. The aftermath of Lothal rippled across the galaxy like shockwaves from a dying star, reshaping political calculations and philosophical certainties in ways no one had anticipated. Pain remained on Ryloth, his 6 paths standing motionless in the canyon where he had first demonstrated divine power, now haunted by the reality of what that power had wrought. Emperor Palpatine had achieved a tactical victory, proving that even godlike beings could be manipulated. That conviction was vulnerable to strategy. But the victory came at a cost: 70,000 Imperial subjects dead, Lothal's infrastructure devastated, and a dangerous precedent set that the Empire would sacrifice its own citizens for political advantage. Rebel intelligence disseminated evidence of the trap's Imperial origins, complicating the propaganda narrative. Darth Vader, witnessing Pain's philosophical collapse, found himself contemplating uncomfortable parallels. He too had believed his suffering served a greater purpose, that his pain fueled necessary strength. But Lothal demonstrated how easily purpose could be perverted, how conviction could be weaponized, how the righteous could be made instruments of atrocity. The seeds of doubt Pain had planted during their battle grew deeper roots. The Rebel Alliance remained cautiously distant, recognizing that Pain was neither ally nor enemy, but something more complex, a being whose genuine desire for peace was undermined by methods that could not account for Imperial duplicity. Mon Mothma authorized continued monitoring but no direct contact, understanding that Pain needed time to process failure and possibly reinvent his approach. On Ryloth, Nagato experienced something he had not felt since Yahiko's death: genuine uncertainty about his path. The Rinnegan still granted him godlike power, but Lothal had proven that power alone was insufficient. The galaxy was more complex than his original world, the opponents more sophisticated, the variables more numerous. His philosophy of peace through shared suffering remained intellectually compelling, but its implementation had been catastrophically flawed. For the first time since awakening his divine eyes, Pain considered the possibility that Ahsoka Tano had been right. That imposing enlightenment, forcing wisdom, compelling understanding, these were fundamentally flawed approaches. That perhaps beings needed to find their own paths to peace, make their own mistakes, learn their own lessons, even if that process took generations and cost millions of lives. It was a humbling realization for a god. But Pain had not abandoned his mission. Instead, he began the difficult work of adaptation, studying this galaxy's history more thoroughly, analyzing the nuances of its conflicts, seeking to understand not just power dynamics but the deeper currents of culture, philosophy, and identity that shaped civilizations. If simple demonstration of overwhelming force was insufficient, then perhaps a more sophisticated approach was required. The Emperor had won this battle, but the war for the galaxy's future, between tyranny and freedom, between imposed order and chaotic self-determination, between divine intervention and mortal agency, was far from over. Pain stood at the canyon's edge, his Rinnegan eyes reflecting Ryloth's twin suns, and spoke a quiet vow to the desert wind. "I failed them. I will not fail again. This galaxy will know peace, but I must become wiser before I can show them the path. Even gods must learn humility." The Lothal incident had changed everything. The self-proclaimed god had been bloodied, the Empire's ruthlessness fully revealed, the rebellion's caution validated. And somewhere in that complex aftermath, new possibilities emerged for alliance, for opposition, for transformation that no one had anticipated. The Star Wars galaxy would never be the same. Pain had entered its history, and whether he ultimately proved savior, destroyer, or something between remained an open question. But one truth had become undeniable: the old certainties, Jedi versus Sith, Empire versus Rebellion, light versus dark, were no longer sufficient to explain a galaxy where gods walked among mortals and suffering became philosophy. The next chapter would be written by those who could adapt, who could learn, who could transcend their own convictions to embrace complexity. Whether pain would be among them, or whether he would remain trapped in the very cycle he sought to break, only time would reveal.